How many human beings do you think are on the planet right now? At the time of this writing, there is about 8.1 billion meat sacks. We officially reached the 8 billion mark on November 15th, 2022, according to estimates by the United Nations. But how many people should be on Earth? As far as how many people can Earth's limited resources comfortably provide quality lives for? That is a more complicated question. And it brings up all kinds of dystopian imagery, like the 1973 film Soylent Green, in which an overpopulated Earth leads to the poor scrambling for food made from human bodies after all the non-human natural food resources have been eliminated. They're making our food out of people. Next thing they'll be breeding us like cattle for food. You've got to tell them. Soylent Green is people. Such a good Charlton Heston scene. This dystopian fear can pretty much be traced back to one man, and it's not Charlton Heston. Thomas Malthus, who posited in 1789 that while the population increases exponentially, the food supply and other resources increase linearly. Linearly. There we go. Meaning that population growth will ultimately outpace the resources needed to sustain it, leading to famine, war, and ultimately chaos, before a smaller population can reestablish itself. Doom! The future of humanity is doomed. Was Tommy Boy right? Are we all destined to compete for resources forever? If the population keeps growing at its current rate, will society plunge into chaos? Well, no, probably not actually. We know now that Malthus's predictions aren't exactly the golden rule. He couldn't anticipate, for example, how technological advancements in agriculture, like the Green Revolution, would lead to a much larger food supply being able to be harvested from the same amount of land. Also, latex condoms were not a thing while he was alive, nor was the birth control pill, or readily available vasectomies. In recent years, contrary to his prediction, our population growth, that's going to be a fun one today, seems to be slowing down. From antiquity until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the global population grew very slowly, at about 0.04% per year. After about 1800, the growth rate accelerated to a peak of 2.1% annually during the 1962 to 1968 period. But since then, due to the worldwide collapse of the total fertility rate, it has been slowing down to 0.9% as of last year. And long-term projections indicate that the growth rate of the human population of the planet will continue to slow, and that before the end of the 21st century, it will reach zero, and then perhaps start decreasing. And in that case, no intervention will be needed. But what if, for some reason, someone decided that they did need to intervene? Some immensely powerful person, perhaps with the backing of a shady international cabal, decided that there were just too many damn people on Earth now, and something had to be done today. From this line of reasoning, modern population control conspiracies that are currently more popular now than ever, have been born. Do they have any merit? Are some of our billionaires secretly trying to cull our human meat sack herd, depopulate the Earth, murder the fucking riffraff? It certainly makes for an interesting and exciting story, or rather, an interesting set of stories. As with most conspiracies, conspiracists just can't seem to come to a consensus as to who exactly are trying to get rid of the lot of us. And they also can't decide how exactly we're being killed. Nobody can even agree as to how or why billionaires, assisted by the United Nations, would even want or be able to depopulate the Earth. And yet, according to numerous theories, they are doing just that. And they're using everything from vaccines, pandemics, chemtrails, birth control, abortion, making people gay, and GMOs to sharply curb the world's population. And they do it mostly because they're just evil, okay? Less people certainly doesn't make rational financial sense for billionaires like Bill Gates, whose money comes directly from people buying his products. Less people means less customers, means less profit. But Bill Gates cares more about being evil than being rich. Or something like that, according to the theories, I guess. He's like Agent Smith in The Matrix, who sees humanity this way. I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply until every natural resource is consumed. The only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure. And that is definitely the way billionaires like Bill Gates think, and not just something written for a sci-fi movie. Or am I just saying that? Am I just mocking all of this because I'm one of the dull-eyed and duller-brained sheeple following the conventional narrative because I'm too stupid and or too cowardly to do anything else? What is the truth? Depopulation conspiracies on today's Suspicious. What is the Illuminati up to? Why can't they just let us live in peace? Damn you, Bill Gates! Wake up, sheeple! Edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Happy Monday, and welcome to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, a suckinator, paralegal for the law offices of Aycock and Butts. Guy who's at least slightly more likable than Kenneth McDuff, and you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. I am recording this after the 400th episode came out, and the consensus seems to be, if you just listen to the episode, I don't sound that high, and mostly just talk faster. But if you watch the episode on YouTube and you actually see my face, I look completely out of my fucking mind for the second half of the episode. Real crazy eyes, which is saying a lot for me. Thank you for all the love on that episode, by the way. I continue to feel so lucky to have such a kind and thoughtful fan base who feel more like friends than fans. So very grateful. And now let's get to cracking. Now for a topic that brings us to all kinds of conspiracy theories. So many that it's almost like maybe some or a lot of these people have literally no idea what they're talking about. Or is that exactly what a bought and paid for Illuminati shill like myself would say? Why am I, starting off the episode no less, clearly not taking this shit seriously? Why trust anything I say? How do I know what I'm talking about? Or since Sophie Evans put the initial research for all this together, how does Sophie know what the fuck she's talking about? Well, luckily, statistics about the world's population are pretty widely available online. It's easy to tell how much we're growing or dwindling. Stats and studies regarding pretty much everything these conspiracies are built on are also very easy to find. But why trust these sources? How do we know that the Illuminati isn't behind all of the numbers, manipulating humanity at every fucking turn behind every website? I can't prove that. No one can. No one can prove that there is not a massive conspiracy, just global, just deep, so far reaching that the entire internet has been manufactured to feed you bullshit narratives, like something from the Matrix. But does that honestly seem possible? I'm guessing you've posted things on the web, on social media at least. Many of you probably have websites or have had websites. Seems a wee bit unlikely that you are also in on the conspiracy that we all are. Right? Keep the principle of Occam's razor present in your mind throughout this episode. The law of parsimony. If you have two competing ideas to explain the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one. If a whole bunch of organizations all come to the same conclusion, what is the simplest explanation? That the conclusion is correct? Or that all of those organizations are feeding you disinformation as part of a global conspiracy to slowly kill and or sterilize you and those you love? If you pick the second answer, you might want to skip this episode. You might want to skip this whole podcast because your brain is bent in a way I don't think I can ever straighten. Back to population sources. According to the reference website Worldometer, the world population at the time of writing of this recording, is currently 8.1 billion. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the population is 8,045,892,000, but it's changing literally every second. According again to the United Nations, the population reached 8 billion on November 14th, 2022. The countries with the biggest populations are India and China, with almost 1.5 billion people apiece. That's fucking insane. Followed by the U.S. with about 341 million. Then Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, Bangladesh, Russia, and Mexico round out the top 10. And all of this has happened in pretty much the last 10,000 years, though modern Homo sapiens have been around for some 160,000 years. At the dawn of agriculture, about 8,000 BCE, the population of the world is estimated to have been approximately 5 million. Over the 8,000-year period, up to 1 CE, it grew to over 200 million. Some estimate 300 million or even 600 million, suggesting how imprecise population estimates of early historical periods can be back when most of the world's tribes of people weren't exactly doing regular census checks and also recording those checks with a growth rate of under 0.05% per year. A tremendous change occurred with the Industrial Revolution, whereas it had taken all of human history until 1800 for the world population to reach approximately 1 billion. The second billion achieved in only 130 years by 1930. And then the third billion came in only 30 years by 1960. The fourth billion in just 15 years by 1974. The fifth billion in 13 years by 1987. The sixth billion in 12 years, 1999. The seventh billion in another 12 years, 2011. And then the eighth billion in yet a dozen years once again. The 20th century was clearly the most explosive century in population growth history by far, with the population of the world growing from around 1.65 billion to 6 billion. And that is alarming, right? That is explosive. This dramatic growth has been driven largely by increasing numbers of people surviving to reproductive age, thanks largely to modern medicine, helping prevent millions and millions of people dying from infectious diseases each and every year. The gradual increase in human lifespan, increasing urbanization, allowing more people to settle in one place and have access to modern medicine and time to pump out a lot of kids. Look at those numbers, another billion people every dozen years. Are you getting nervous? Worried that a few poorly timed droughts or some new infectious disease wiping out chickens or wheat could tilt us into some kind of Fallout or Mad Max kind of world in the immediate future? If you're worried, you might be unknowingly subscribing to the ideas of English mathematician Thomas Malthus, who, as I stated up top, believed that while population increases exponentially, resources increase linearly. Nailed it that time. Meaning the population can swiftly outpace the world's resources, leading to calamity. Luckily, Malthus's theories have proven to not hold up to the present day because of things like innovations in agriculture. We can now feed many more than we could have ever dreamed of feeding in Malthus's day. And also, as I again teased up top, if you're really worried about overpopulation, maybe it'll make you feel better to know the growth rate is slowing. Population in the world is growing at a rate of around 0.91% per year in 2024, up from 0.88% in 2023, down from 0.98% in 2020, and 1.06% in 2019. The current population increase is estimated at around 73 million people per year. Annual growth rate reached its peak in the late 1960s when it was around 2%. So while the Earth has been adding a billion people every 12 or 13 years since 1974, it will take an estimated 14 to 15 years to reach 9 billion, and then over 20 years to add another billion to reach 10 around 2060. All of these numbers, excluding the possibility of some great depopulation calamity. Currently, estimates have the world's population starting to decrease for the next several decades after 2060. World population will therefore continue to grow into the 21st century, but at a much slower rate compared to the recent past, and also eventually peaking and then decreasing. And why would it ever start to decrease? For a variety of reasons. For one, because a lot of people are getting pretty tired of fucking your mom. You heard me! She's past her prime. She's clearly not into it. And she never puts on lingerie anymore, and most just wear sweatpants. It's not fun. Sorry, that was for me. That was a wake-up to anyone only half listening. No, one is greater access to birth control in more and more developing countries. Another is an overall decline in religion. While a large number of people still identify as being religious, overall, less people are going to church than in years past. Less people are as strident about religious law, and therefore, more women's bicycles are getting cummed on instead of cummed in. Crass but true. The rising cost of housing, medical care, education, just life in general in a lot of developed nations is also a deterrent for more and more people to have kids or to have a bunch of kids. More and more people simply just can't afford to. And this trend isn't expected to go away anytime soon. Gone are the days for most of the world of living off of what you're able to farm on your own land or of one blue-collar provider making plenty of money to take care of a large family. So it doesn't seem as if some nefarious plan concocted by wealthy elites to sterilize and or murder millions of the poor makes a lot of sense, does it? If these elites are worried about the world getting too crowded, of the riffraff getting too close to their country clubs and gated communities, they don't need to get their hands dirty. They just need to keep being rich. Just wait a bit. But what if you were an insanely powerful person who wanted to reduce the world's population and for some reason you didn't want to wait that long? Right? What if you wanted to wipe out a large swath of the population right now and for the next several decades to come? Could you do it? Could you be doing it now, secretly? Would you be able to use things like chemtrails to sterilize and or poison the world's population for some unidentifiable reason? This is exactly what the broad swaths of population control conspiracy theorists believe, and who we'll be covering today. According to a YouGov survey in 2019, YouGov being a British international internet-based market research and data analytics firm, 8% of Americans strongly believe that the government is using airborne chemicals to control the population. 11% somewhat believe that, and another 19% neither believe nor disbelieve. So, not that many years ago, 38% of the population either thought, oh, fuck yeah, we're being poisoned to keep us sterile or to kill us. Or, we're probably being poisoned. Or, maybe. I wouldn't doubt it if we're being poisoned. This is a very common fear. And that bums me out, but it doesn't surprise me. Right? Well, kind of depressing to think about all the crazy shit so many millions of people believe that flies in the face of logic and reason. It's pretty entertaining to learn about where these beliefs come from. So let's do that right now. So how am I going to tackle this crazy topic today? Much like the global elites have killed off the world's population, they've also killed off this week's Timesuck timeline. Rest in peace. While there's definitely a lot of historical ground to cover, none of it really fits into a conventional, straightforward narrative. And that's because population control is one of the biggest, widest, most loosey-goosey conspiracy theories out there, fitting into wacky ideas about everything from pandemics to birth control to chemtrails. Because there are so many different schools of thought, or rather, schools of whatever you would call thought that people who aren't real good at thinking have about population control coming from so many different perspectives, it's easier to group these theories into general categories. So after delving into the history of how we as meat sacks have thought about the idea of a population for thousands of years, including how these people have practiced their own kinds of population control, we'll take a look at some of the people that conspiracy theorists say are in charge of today's murderous, media-manipulating, maniacal population experiments. Then we'll get into the conspiracy theories in broad categories, beginning with the most obvious, population control via widespread illness, and moving into fertility, chemtrails, etc. Let us begin. Let us put some yip in the yaw. Should be no surprise to us that for as long as there's been human societies, there have been questions about the population. After all, the population of an area is one of its most basic features, providing information that is essential to the structure of a society. By knowing the population, you can answer questions about how many resources the population will require to sustain itself, how many people are of an age where they can work and contribute to society, and crucially, how many babies are arriving to replenish that population and make sure that the society doesn't, die out. For a long time in society, the more people you had, the better. More people, to battle for your kingdom. More young people to farm your land, grow your crops, raise your livestock. More young people to fuck and carry on your lineage. More young people to carry on your traditions, keep your kingdom going, and help take care of you as you age. Way back around 300 BCE, the Indian political philosopher Chanakya, who lived from 350 to 283 BCE, considered population a source of political, economic, and military strength. Pretty simple equation. You can crush your enemies if you have more soldiers to throw at them than they have to throw at you. His perspective was influenced by watching the armies of Alexander the Great wreak fucking havoc in his land. Though a given region can house too many or too few people, Chanakya considered the latter possibility to be the greater evil. To that end, Chanakya favored the remarriage of widows, which at the time was actually forbidden in India, opposed taxes encouraging immigration, and believed in restricting asceticism, a lifestyle of no sensual pleasures, and to that end, no sex, to the aged. However, numerous ancient theorists also believed you could have too many people. In ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle discussed the best population size for Greek city-states such as Sparta, and concluded that cities should be small enough for efficient administration and direct citizen participation in public affairs, but at the same time needed to be large enough to defend themselves against hostile neighbors. In order to maintain really fighting the urge to make some butt-fucking reference, because Sparta was brought up there from that episode. In order to maintain a desired population size, the philosophers advised that procreation, and if necessary, immigration, should be encouraged if the population size was too small. But Aristotle also concluded that a large increase in population would bring, quote, certain poverty on the citizenry, and poverty is the cause of sedition and evil. It's almost like he was a pretty smart guy, pretty logical dude or something. To halt rapid population increase, Aristotle advocated the use of abortion and the exposure of newborns. That is, leaving them in wild areas to die. Yeah, that's pretty harsh. But if you take emotion out of it, the logic, pretty solid. Our natural instinct is to protect newborns at any cost. But if you zoom out and look at this through the cold, uncaring lens of pragmatism, what is more cruel? Killing newborns at birth or letting them grow up to live a life of almost certain continual pain and suffering since there isn't enough resources to properly provide for them? Again, it's cold-blooded, but it's also, at the very least, an interesting philosophical discussion point. The birth of massive empires like ancient Rome would soon put concerns like that about overpopulation on the back burner. With a massive swath of land to fill up, nearly 2 million square miles at its peak under the heralded Emperor Trajan, the demand was clear for more, and still more Romans. Get to fucking. We got a lot of land to take over. In fact, a series of laws was instituted to encourage early marriage and frequent childbirth. Lex Julia, passed in 18 BCE, and the Lex Poppaea, passed in CE 9, 9 CE, are two well-known examples of such laws, which among others provided tax breaks and preferential treatment when applying for public office for those who complied with the laws. Severe limitations were imposed on those who did not. For example, the surviving spouse of a childless couple could only inherit 1/10 of the deceased fortune, while the rest would be taken by the state. So take that, you infertile, selfish fucks! Those laws didn't last long, however, though. They encountered heavy resistance from the population, which led to the disregard of their provisions and to their eventual abolition. Now let's fast forward a couple hundred years. Europeans were not the only ones thinking about population and how it contributed to the overall quality of a society. Ibn Khaldun, a North African polymath and prominent Arab sociologist, historian, and philosopher who lived from 1332 to 1406, considered population changes to be connected to economic development, linking high birth rates and low death rates to times of economic upswing, and low birth rates and high death rates to economic downswing. Khaldun concluded that high population density, rather than high absolute population numbers, were desirable to achieve more efficient division of labor and cheap administration. This dude would have loved to have witnessed the Industrial Revolution. He'd be like, I fucking told you guys! Heavily populated urban centers are where it is at for explosive economic growth. And then there were the Middle Ages, aka the Dark Ages, aka a time many of the conspiratorial crowd today seem to kind of pine for, right? Fuck science, fuck doctors, fuck formal educators. The Dark Ages was a time when critical thinking in Europe took a backseat, and this was reflected in the thoughts on population at the time as well. Attitudes were generally pro-natalist, meaning pro, get your fuck on, essentially Hail Lucifina, in line with the biblical command to be ye fruitful and multiply. This undoubtedly served economic and social purposes. With high child mortality rates, you needed multiple children for just one of them to have a good shot of making it to adulthood. And this attitude was dope for dudes who got to fuck a lot and never worried about dying in childbirth. Also, children were basically a self-created workforce if you owned a farm or a store that required a lot of labor, which many did. But as the world became increasingly more connected, people started to differ about whether bigger was indeed better when it came to population, as the Roman Empire believed, or whether a bigger population led to increased stress due to the increased possibility of famines, plagues, and more, like the Greeks talked about. In the former camp were people like French philosopher Jean Bodin, who lived in the 16th century and argued that larger populations meant more production and more exports, increasing the wealth of a country. Right? Fuck. Ride those bicycles. Jump them. Run them into ditches. Take them off as many ramps as possible. And most importantly, don't just come on their handlebars. Likewise, Italian priest Giovanni Botero, who lived from 1540 to 1617, emphasized that the greatness of a city rests on the multitude of its inhabitants and their power. But others thought that more people simply led to more crime, like Richard Hakluyt, always a Richard showing up, who observed that through our long peace and seldom sickness, we are grown more populous than ever heretofore. Many thousands of idle persons are within this realm, which having no way to be set on work, be either mutinous and seek alteration in the state, or at least very burdensome to the commonwealth. I should have started out talking like that, those weird old English words. That was his way of saying, pull out, for God's sake, man, pull out. Maybe just leave those bicycles in the shed where they can gather dust and never be ridden. But undoubtedly the biggest influence on how people thought about population for centuries to come would be the British clergyman and economist, the mathematician Thomas Malthus, who I've mentioned several times now. We actually talked about that dude before in the Mouse Utopia experiment suck, episode 324. Did you forget we covered that? I did, actually. Let's recap him now. Unlike the people we've mentioned above, with maybe the exception of Richard Hakluyt, who were mostly interested in the populations of individual nations and how that contributed or took away from those nations' overall success, Malthus zoomed out further. He would focus on the human race as a whole and draw some very doom and gloom conclusions. In a 1798 paper titled An Essay on the Principle of Population, Malthus theorized that population growth again was exponential, while growth of the food supply was, for the last time, linear. This meant to him that the population could and would outpace the production of food and natural resources, which would then lead to a massive starvation or conflict that would kill off a portion of the population, bringing the total population down to a level in pace with the world's resources. And then this cycle would repeat. Doesn't sound like a very fun cycle. But to prevent this, Malthus did not advocate for the population to be curbed. Like most people at the time, he believed that a steadily growing population remained a necessary factor in the continuing progress of society. He also, paradoxically, considering his prediction, worried that birth control could become too powerful in curbing the population and thus curbing growth. And this gets us to the pretty foundational contradiction about population, reflected already in many of the thinkers we've just covered. A large population is a good thing. You need lots of people, hopefully more than your enemies, to succeed as a society. And you also need to grow that population so that your society progresses, so that there are enough people to take over the jobs left behind by people who die, plus more to fill in the gaps in case those people die or there's some catastrophic event. But you also can't have too many people, because that puts a strain on resources and leads to famine, and famine leads to more crime as people get desperate and so on and so forth. So how do you figure out the perfect balance? And how does nature, the government, religion, and any other population influencing forces I've forgotten to mention come together to create balanced growth? It's probably likely that we'll never solve that exact equation. You would need to know all of the world's resources and all available land and be able to plan it out and have every single country adhere to a strict policy and not to have religion influence any part of human behavior regarding procreation. You would truly need the Illuminati, an incredibly powerful cabal who rule the entire world. An actual one world, new world order government. In that scenario, ironically, life could be the best it has ever been for the world at large, for the average person, or in the world at large for the average person. You know, conspiracy theorists' greatest fear could actually lead to a utopia because the world would, for the first time ever, be managed by one governing body that theoretically could provide the most equitable division of resources the earth has ever seen. Conversely, a government that powerful could also enslave humanity to a degree the likes of which the world has never seen. Many believe that some form of this governing body already exists, and that divisions between nations and the freedoms we think we have in a nation like the U.S. merely an illusion. We are already enslaved and controlled, and the Earth's population is already being culled. These UN and census data numbers, all bullshit. Illuminati lies to keep us from rioting in the streets. Wake up, sheeple! Now back to Malthus briefly. Let's follow how his ideas persisted so we can understand more about how his doom and gloom approach became a standard commonly held belief. Neo-Malthusianism, or New Malthusianism, would pop up in the middle of the 20th century as an ideological construct as more and more people started looking at how population and the environment interacted in a new global economy. A revival of Malthus's thoughts began in the late 1940s, and it's never left. It began with the publication of two influential books in 1948 that painted a pretty grim future for the world. Fairfield Osborne's Our Plundered Planet and William Voigt's Road to Survival. When these books were published, the population of the world was rising dramatically, right? As we went over, the world's population rose from roughly 1 billion in 1800 to 1.65 billion in 1900. Very slow growth compared to what would come next. While the world's population exploded in the 20th century, particularly in the second half of the 20th century, many began to sound the alarm, right, regarding the potential dangers of population growth. In 1968, American ecologist and microbiologist Garrett Hardin published an influential essay in Science that drew heavily from Malthusian theory. His essay, The Tragedy of the Commons, argued that, quote, a finite world can support only a finite population, and that, quote, freedom to breed will bring ruin to all. Also in 1968, Paul R. Ehrlich, a U.S. biologist and environmentalist, published The Population Bomb, advocating stringent population planning policies. His central argument on population is as follows. A cancer is an uncontrolled multiplication of cells. The population explosion is an uncontrolled multiplication of people. Treating only the symptoms of cancer may make the victim more comfortable at first, but eventually he dies, often horribly. A similar fate awaits a world with a population explosion, if only the symptoms are treated. We must shift our efforts from the treatment of the symptoms to the cutting out of cancer. The operation will demand many apparently brutal and heartless decisions. The pain may be intense, but the disease is so far advanced that only with radical surgery does the patient have a chance to survive. And that's it's pretty dark. Reminds me of the Matrix quote above, but also beautifully written. Hard truths. But based on the population trajectory that existed when Ehrlich wrote that, combined with the world's understanding at that time regarding agricultural and livestock production limitations, not incorrect assumptions. I don't know why I keep messing up so many words. In his concluding chapter, Ehrlich offered a partial solution to the problem he saw. Compulsory birth regulation through the addition of temporary sterilants to water supplies or staple food. Doses of the antidote would be carefully rationed by the government to produce the desired family size. Sounds fucked up, but also much better than the alternative of mass starvation. The U.S. government would not go that far as we know, but they would begin to do their own investigating regarding fears of overpopulation. In 1969, President Nixon, hippie-hating tricky dick, issued to Congress a message on population, referring to the expectation at the time that the U.S. population might exceed 300 million by the year 2000. He said this growth will produce serious challenges for our society. I believe that many of our present social problems, how did he talk? I believe that many of our present social problems may be related to the fact that we have only 50 years in which to accommodate the second 100 million Americans. In fact, since 1945 alone, some 90 million babies have been born in this country. We have thus had to accommodate, in a very few decades, an adjustment to population growth, which was once spread over centuries. Now it appears that we will have to provide for a third 100 million Americans in a period of just 30 years. I mean, when you hear that, it is alarming. No wonder so many of us, myself included, are continually irritated with the government. I mean, the governments of most modern nations have had to deal with unprecedented population growth, not a small task. I know that population growth cannot excuse all of government's problems, but when it's unprecedented, of course it's going to be an issue, a big one. Imagine running a business where you have 100 customers a day. And in this hypothetical scenario, you have to provide a service for all those customers every day. To keep this thought experiment simple, you run a pizza place that specializes in selling pizza by the slice, and everyone buys a couple slices. Then over 10 years' time, you slowly and steadily grow, and now you have 110 customers. You have plenty of time to hire, you've had plenty of time to hire an extra employee to help out. But then over the next 10 years, each year you take on 20 more customers, twice as many as you took on in the first full decade. 20 times as many new customers each year as you took on each year for the previous 10 years. And now if you're going from 100 customers to 110 in the first decade, you go from 110 to 310 customers. You're going to have some serious growing pains. You're going to be pulling your fucking hair out trying to keep up. This is what many governments across the world have experienced for a century now, over a century. Continual massive growing pains. And they've had to deal with a lot more shit than just dishing out pizza slices. One result of Nixon's message was passage in 1970 of Title X of the Public Health Service Act, providing family planning services for low-income women and men struggling to keep up with the quickly growing nation. Another was the creation of the Commission on Population Growth and the American Future, chaired by John D. Rockefeller III, which released a multi-volume study of the U.S. population growth and its impacts in 1972. Recognizing that our population cannot grow indefinitely and appreciating the advantages of moving now toward the stabilization of population, the Commission recommends that the nation welcome and plan for a stabilized population. That was its most widely cited passage. The Commission report goes on to state, in short, we find no convincing economic argument for continued national population growth. And that could definitely read as the government is about getting ready to do something drastic, fanning the flames of a depopulation conspiracy. But this report did not find that the population needed to dramatically decrease either. The Commission submitted its final recommendations in 1972, which included promoting contraceptives and liberalizing abortion regulations. However, by the time that report came out, the actual birth rate was already falling. In 1969, when Nixon made his speech, U.S. families averaged between 2 and 3 children. The total fertility rate was 2.5. so that parents more than replaced themselves and generation numbers were growing ever larger. But by the time the commission released its report in 1972, birth control's been around a little while now as far as the pill, the total fertility rate had fallen to 2 children, or replacement level, but really an average of 2 children is a bit below replacement level because not all children survive until adulthood to become part of the population determining birth rates for the subsequent generation. And then the following year, the fertility rate fell below 2 children per family, where it stayed all the way until 1989. And this declining birth rate seemed to resonate with most Americans' wishes they had held for a long time. In 1974, 87% of respondents to a Roper poll, data collected by the Roper Center for Public Opinion Research at Cornell University, said they did not wish the country had more people. And a 1971 poll by the U.S. Commission on Population Growth and the American Future found that 22% felt U.S. population should be smaller than it was then, which was close to 200 million. As long ago as 1947, when the U.S. population was 140 million, Gallup found that 55% of Americans believed the country would be worse off with more people. Yeah, we all fucking hate traffic. We all hate standing in lines. Much more recent rabble-rousing comedian Dan Cummins released an album in 2018 called Maybe I'm the Problem, which further fanned the nonsensical flames of the planet being overcrowded, freaking out conspiracy theorists as he advocated ignorantly putting sterilization chips into people.
Mandatory sterilization. Let's talk about it. I wanted to open up on it, but I didn't know if you trusted me yet. I feel like we reached that point in the evolution of our species where we need to address this, And I realize there is not a good historical precedent of a white dude bringing this shit up. But hear me out. I got a little different angle. It doesn't make any sense from a logic point of view. You just can't we have a limited amount of resources. You can't keep pumping out, mouth breather after non-contributor after shithead at an exponential rate and expect a pleasant ecosystem for the rest of us to perpetually enjoy. That's not a sustainable equation. It's not responsible to let, 14-year-olds continue to play pull-out roulette and just pop out tax burdens. It's insanity. It's insanity. Somebody smarter than me could put an end to it. Some nanotechnologist, some biotech engineer could develop a sterilization chip, little microchip that's put in every single baby, every race, gender, sterilized until they're at least 25 years old. Whole human race. And then if you're 25 or older and you would like to have kids, you can. If you can pass a test of basic parental abilities. You got to earn that shit. That'd be nice.
Whoa.
Right?
Woohoo. Crowd was laughing, but I don't know why. That idiot was just perpetuating the very fear I'm trying to debunk now. Good job, Can Dummins, you fucking alarmist twat. I do get why people fear the government, forcing sterilizations or worse on a population. It has happened. And I'm not talking about Hitler. I'm talking about China's one-child policy. The Chinese government introduced this policy in 1978 to alleviate ongoing social and environmental problems of China, both of which had been exacerbated by China's Great Leap Forward and Mao's Cultural Revolution. Mao Zedong tried to get people to have more children, believing in a growing population's overall positive contribution to the country's success. As a result, the population almost doubled in one generation. It's fucking insane. It grew from around 540 million in 1949 to 940 million in 1976, leading to massive strains on China's infrastructure, resources, and the environment. In the years preceding China's one-child policy, publicly, to whoever would listen, China claimed that this growth was not a problem. It was a huge problem. Still, to the world community, Chinese delegates to the UN actually expressed their opposition towards population control. In the first UN-organized World Population Conference held in Bucharest in 1969, they claimed that population control was an imperialist Western agenda imposed on third world countries, and that population was not a determining factor of economic growth and a country's well-being. But secretly, within their communist government discussions, they were talking about how the rapid, population growth was sabotaging the economy and destroying the environment, and essentially preventing China from becoming a global power. So they started, commissioning research. Since population studies in China were forbidden from the 1950s until 1979, population science had made no progress between those decades, which meant that they had a lot of catching up to do. The first wave of policies to come out of the studies were basically suggestions. They called for postponing childbearing until later in life, longer time spans between children, and giving birth to fewer children overall. Men were encouraged to marry at 25 or later, and women now encouraged to marry at 23 or later. But these encouragements had virtually no effect on a continually and explosively expanding population. So authorities then began to strongly encourage one-child families for many citizens in 1978, and in 1979 announced that they intended to advocate for one-child families for everybody. Over 6 million families that had already given birth to one child were given one-child honorary certificates. This was a pledge they had to make to ensure they would not have more kids. And if they had more kids, there's going to be consequences. Later, 1979, pledges became laws. Initial restrictions were mostly enforced in densely populated urban areas. Violators of China's one-child policy could be fined, forced to have abortions, forced to have sterilizations, lose their jobs, be imprisoned, and more. A near-universal one-child limit was imposed in 1980 and written into the country's constitution in 1982. Beginning in 1980, the official policy granted local officials the flexibility to make exceptions and allow second children in the case of practical difficulties, such as cases in which the father was a disabled serviceman or when both parents were single children, and some provinces had other exemptions worked into their policies as well. In most areas, families were allowed to apply to have a second child if their firstborn was a daughter. Then by 1984, only approximately 35% of the population fell within the policy's original restriction. As of 2007, only 36% of the population were subjected to a strict one-child limit. 53% were permitted to have a second child if the first was a daughter. 9.6% of Chinese couples were permitted 2 children regardless of their gender, and just 1.6%, mainly Tibetans, no limit at all. This policy would formally come to an end in 2015, but it's had lasting effects. For one thing, because of the preference for male children, China had a massive rise in the abortion of female fetuses, the number of baby girls left in orphanages, and even in infanticides of baby girls. On January 7th, 1985, the headline of a Washington Post article read, "China's birth control policy drives some to kill baby girls." Check out how the article starts. Datong, China. In this rugged hardpan of North China, known for poverty and coal, Zhang Yi had but 2 frail daughters to help scratch out a living. When his wife became pregnant again, he hoped for a son, brushing off official threats of penalties for an unauthorized third child. But his wife bore another girl, and Zhang recalculated the cost. He packed the child in a cardboard box, left her for dead, and informed authorities that she was stillborn, according to family planning officials here. Damn. And it continues with, the baby girl became another victim of the ugliest side effect of China's war against overpopulation, female infanticide. Official population statistics indicate a loss of more than 230,000 baby girls in 1981. A casualty list that is said to have grown dramatically in more recent years as the communist government tightened its nationwide policy, limiting Chinese couples to have one child. Authorities have refused to reveal sex ratios of newborns after 1981. 230,000 baby girls, not fetuses, babies. Children born living and then killed because the family was hoping for a boy. And not just babies were killed. Later on in the article, an even more horrifying excerpt, Lu Chunsan, a farmer from East China, threw his 4-year-old girl down a well 2 years ago, believing that his wife could be given another chance for a boy if the couple were childless. Sentenced to 15 years in jail, he told a Chinese reporter that he wanted a son as a hedge against the future. "I loved my daughter," Lu said in a prison interview. "But sooner or later, she would get married and leave me for a husband. I would have supported her for 20 years for nothing." Chun San's arrest was the exception to the rule. Most people who killed their daughters were never punished. This kind of shit, understandably, fuels dystopian fears centered around population control. Also, what a fucking psycho. Sure, I loved her. Of course I loved her. I mean, she's my baby girl. But, I mean, come on. She's not going to fucking help me. There's no way she's going to wipe my ass when I'm 90. So, fucking down the well she goes. It's cold-blooded shit. This horrific policy continues to affect marriage and birth rates around China currently. Fewer females being born for 2 previous generations has left a lot fewer women of childbearing age in China today. Also means that as time goes on for the next few generations, more of the population will be older and far fewer will be the young workforce needed to support them. Estimated that the share of adults aged 65 and older will have risen from just 12% today to a projected 26% by 2050. And all of this sounds, scary, authoritarian, dystopian, because it is. But does it mean that an authoritarian government always wants to depopulate its citizenry? Well, no. Rather, it's long been a common goal of most governments to stabilize a population, which does require changing policies over time. Responding to the loss of huge swaths of the population from World War II, Eastern European, predominantly communist countries instituted policies that were the opposite of China's one-child policy to boost their populations. In 1946, Poland introduced a tax on the childless, discontinued in the 1970s, as part of its population-boosting efforts. Good thing they did. Not sure Lindsay would have been born otherwise. Her lazy Polish dad would not have bothered. Kidding. He's Polish, but he's born in Cleveland. Similarly, from 1941 to the 1990s, the Soviet Union had a similar, policy to replenish the population losses incurred during the Second World War. The government even went as far as to give medals and honorary titles to women for having large families. Tatiana, you are a hero for Russia. I present you this medal, featuring picture of all the ripped, tattered of windsock, for represent your brave vagina hole. And I bestow, with great honor, title of Golden Cum Dumpster for receiving much Russian sperm and ejecting much Russian baby meat from sperm gulag between legs. This program was so successful that it caused Russia's birth rate to exceed the government's initial expectations. Satisfied that the population was stable once more, the government phased out the tax, not to mention many of the other benefits that came with having a lot of kids. Fucking Duggars, they would fucking crush it over in Russia. And if these past examples aren't evidence enough that governments don't want population to get too small, the government of Iran previously encouraged people to have less children starting around 1989 to combat a boom in the population lasting from 1976 to 1996. But now, because this encouragement was too successful, the government has begun cutting funding to the programs to facilitate lower birth rates, to boost what they feel like is a population too small for their liking. For example, vasectomies, once free, now cost money. And soon Iran may ban vasectomies altogether and make it tougher, if not near impossible, for women to get abortions and for people to use contraceptives. As of 2021, public health center providers legally not allowed to give away free contraceptives unless a pregnancy would threaten the mother's life. Looking at this push and pull, it's very clear that the government, or that no government, on the face of the earth has ever wanted to actually wipe out a big chunk of its citizenry outside of racially or ideologically motivated attacks like, what occurred with Nazi Germany. Rather, they tried to manipulate birth rates in order to achieve a stable population that can be reliably sustained by the country's resources. And yet, conspiracy theorists still believe that a depopulation plot is either on the rise or has already been enacted here in the U.S. There are many, many strains of conspiracy theories about population control, but they all seem to boil down into a couple of main categories: pandemics, vaccines, fertility manipulation, chemtrails, GMOs, to name the ones we'll be covering today. It's hard to know where to begin with all of this, but one place could be, who's in charge of all this culling? Time and time again, accusations of population manipulation. Say that 5 times fast. Accusations of population manipulation. Accusations of population manipulation. Fall on the shoulders of one set of people. Any guess who the culprits are? Peruvians. Fucking Peruvians! Always trying to murder huge swaths of the population. No, billionaires. As early as the mid-2000s, billionaires became the targets of these accusations. The most wealthy billionaires. Even the Wall Street Journal reported on this in 2009. That article reported on the New York meeting of billionaires Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, David Rockefeller, Eli Broad, George Soros, Ted Turner, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Bloomberg, and Pee Wee Herman. Not Pee Wee, a few others. This meeting was described in an issue. I don't know why I just cracked myself up randomly picturing Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens in that room. The Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and then this guy going, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, whatever his fucking laugh was. Making mockery of the meeting. This meeting was described in an issue of the Chronicle of Philanthropy as an informal gathering aimed at encouraging charitable donation with no particular agenda. But then an article in the Times of London headlined Billionaire Club in Bid to Curb World Population said the issues discussed in the top secret meeting included healthcare, education, and by far the most controversial, slowing the global population growth. Taking their cue from Gates, they agreed that overpopulation was a priority, the article stated, adding that, quote, this could result in a challenge to some third world politicians who believe contraception and female education weaken traditional values. And here we go. Right at the beginning of the narrative of Bill Gates being an evil Illuminati motherfucker who wants to eliminate the poor. Conspiracy blogs immediately began to attack this billionaire group as a secret sterilization society. Fucking Bill and Oprah pulling the strings, deciding who lives, who dies. No more of you get a car, everybody gets a car. Now it's you get to die, everybody gets to die. And the accusations have only intensified in the years since. About Bill. The conspiracy crowd seems to have left Oprah out of the narrative recently. Perhaps no individual billionaire has been the focus of these conspiracies more than Bill Gates. Full name William Henry Gates III. Bill's an American computer programmer, Seattle native, entrepreneur who co-founded Microsoft Corporation, the world's largest personal computer software company. Gates wrote his first software program at the age of 13. In high school, he helped form a group of programmers who computerized their school's payroll system and founded Trafodata, a company that sold traffic counting systems to local government. He did that in fucking high school. 1975, Gates, now a sophomore at Harvard University, joined his hometown friend Paul G. Allen to develop software for the first microcomputers, or personal computers. They started with BASIS, a popular programming language used on large computers, and adapted it to be used on microcomputers. When that turned out to be successful, Gates left Harvard during his junior year and with Allen formed Microsoft. Soon Microsoft would license an operating system called MS-DOS to the International Business Machines Corporation, better known as IBM, for use on its first microcomputer, the IBM PC personal computer. With the power of Microsoft behind it, IBM quickly set the technical standard for the PC industry, and Gates managed to manipulate the comparatively larger IBM so that it became permanently dependent on him for crucial software. Makers of IBM-compatible PCs or clones also turned to Microsoft for their basic software. By the start of the 1990s, Gates had become the PC industry's ultimate kingmaker, and all this made him very, very rich. He became a billionaire in 1986. Within the decade, his net worth reached into the tens of billions. He was either the wealthiest person in the U.S. or the second wealthiest every single year from 1991, when he was worth $4.8 billion, all the way to 2020, basically 3 decades. Well, not basically, was 3 decades when he was worth $111 billion. For most of those years, he was the wealthiest person, not just in the U.S., but in the world. He's currently 5th wealthiest, worth $148 billion when I checked on May 7th. That is an insane amount of wealth. The world's most expensive private residence, the Antilia in Mumbai, India, is worth $2 billion. It's a 27-story, 400,000 square foot custom skyscraper standing 570 feet tall. Bill could buy 5 of those motherfuckers and just give them away and still be the 10th wealthiest person on earth. Being this rich for this long has for sure made him some enemies. Rivals, particularly in competing companies in Silicon Valley, have frequently portrayed him as driven, duplicitous, and determined to profit from virtually every electronic transaction in the world. His supporters, however, have celebrated his uncanny business acumen, his flexibility, his boundless appetite for finding new ways to make computers useful, both to the expert and the ordinary person. What conspiracy theorists have pointed to as proof of his evilness is, strangely, his charity work. How fucking dare he give away so much money? What a piece of shit! He and his then-wife Melinda launched the William H. Gates Foundation, renamed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in 1999. In 1994, it was renamed that in 1999. It was founded in 1994 to fund global health programs as well as various projects in the Pacific Northwest. Actually, my kids, Kyler Monroe's high school, received a lot of funding from this foundation over the years. The foundation mainly focuses on global agriculture and economic development, medical research, and public health initiatives in developing countries, and the improvement of education and access to information. It provides partnerships and grants, for example, to support the research of rice and flour variants enriched with micronutrients, to research best practices for financial planning for those living in poverty, and to develop systems for improving water quality, sanitation, and hygiene throughout the world. Between 1990, 4 years before the foundation started, to show the impact this foundation has had, over 12 million children a year died in the world. By 2017, that number fell to below 6 million, and the single biggest reason is increased vaccine coverage in children in developing nations. Because of that, it's estimated that in the past 3 decades, over 100 million children's lives have been saved, and tens of millions of those lives have been saved thanks specifically to Bill and Melinda's evil philanthropy. More recently, the foundation spent almost $10 billion on responding to COVID across the globe. The foundation has given away roughly $60 billion so far to help cure disease, provide food for the world's poorest people, and more, And they'll keep giving away billions and billions because their current endowment is somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 billion. But some think that Bill Gates, and thus the Gates Foundation, is up to something very nefarious. I'll share what that terrible comic I mentioned earlier, Can Dummins, spoke about what he said about Bill Gates and some dumb bit of his from trying to get better.
My favorite conspiracies from the last couple of years are the ones that revolve around Bill Gates. A lot of Bill Gates concern. A lot of people worried. Like after the COVID vaccine came out, there was a contingent of people online who were like, do not take that fake vaccine. Bill Gates made that. And one of my first thoughts was, that's impressive for a computer programmer. Like, I always knew he was smart, but goddamn. And interesting move for him to take his hands off the wheel of running a multi-billion-dollar international conglomerate for a couple days or whatever to head down to his laboratory and tinker with his evil beakers. Cook up some poison. They're like, yeah, don't take this vaccine. It's not real, right? It's poison. It's part of an Agenda 21 depopulation program designed to kill millions of people. And when I first heard that, I immediately thought, this can't be real. Because that is simply too good to be true.
What?
That's a dream. I would love to put Bill Gates in charge of a mass extermination event. He's a smart guy. I feel like he'd get rid of the right people. I think we should encourage him online to start a hashtag movement. Just let Bill kill. Release the Kraken.
Gross. Still don't get why people laugh at that guy. This is serious shit. But is he doing something nefarious? Well, Gates' wealth, coupled with his ties to big tech, his governmental contacts, his control of a major public health foundation, do maybe give him the means to possibly engage in and cover up untoward activities undetected. And one of those activities might be depopulation, but I doubt it. Here's what he's really doing. In 1999, his foundation gave a $20 million grant to establish the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health at the John Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, according to the Institute's website. The Institute focuses on research in family planning, reproductive health, and population dynamics. Sounds like pretty good shit to focus on. Also, in doing ongoing work about climate change, Bill Gates has also pointed to the fact that carbon emissions are rising in part due to population growth. And that is seen as proof that he wants to kill us. But that is not a nefarious suggestion. It's just fact. It's science. But, more and more people are skeptical of all science. Being pro-science is seen as being, for lack of a better term, as being woke by many. Being educated is being woke. And I guess I'm really not that surprised. Right? Much, much easier just to write out science as being a bunch of stupid bullshit than it is to take the time and put in the fucking work and effort to actually understand science. And the people who write science off, their beliefs are, well, pretty hard to change. That level of ignorance breeds a certain, especially despicable type of arrogance that I think can best be explained by the Dunning-Kruger effect, defined as a cognitive bias that occurs when someone overestimates their knowledge or abilities in a particular area. Even though they may not be very knowledgeable in that area, this can happen because people may not be self-aware enough, i.e. smart enough, to accurately assess their skills. Take a sampling of the conspiracy crowd's basic writing ability by looking at their comments/reviews under a lot of YouTube videos, on Facebook, under certain books on Amazon, etc. Not a crowd used to getting a lot of A's on school research papers. They can often barely, put a properly structured and punctuated sentence together. But the pseudo gibberish they do write, very confident in their position. Why? Because they are literally not educated enough to be able to understand how little they actually know about what they are commenting on. And that is why I am pro formal education. If you can afford it, go. It's not just about job skills. It's about increasing your knowledge base so that you can understand the world around you a little better and can be a more intelligent meat sack and help push humanity in a more positive direction. With enough education, you can understand, for example, what conspiracies might have legs and which ones are nonsense and a complete waste of your time and energy to entertain. The notion of Bill Gates being a depopulation ringleader began to gain a lot of traction in the early 2000s, with mainstream media picking up on it by the end of the decade. There's one clip of a 2010 TED Talk that would explode. In the clip, Gates introduces a mathematical equation to calculate the amount of global emissions and how to lower them. Part of the equation included the size of the global population. First, we've got a population. Bill says the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%, but there we see an increase of about 1.3. Gates' comment about the population was a mere fragment of this speech. He spoke largely about the types of energy and actions that produce CO2 and proposed a solution of energy measures like nuclear, wind, and solar that would reduce carbon dioxide emissions a great deal by 2050. However, conspiracy theorists in general, in my observation, aren't real good with context. They seem to delight in taking quotes out of context in order to push whatever narrative they want to sell. And by taking this quote out of context, they frame Gates as suggesting that his foundation is looking primarily into reducing the population, as if that's its primary purpose. However, Gates was never suggesting the global population should be killed off using vaccines. He was instead saying that improving public health using vaccinations can reduce an unsustainable population growth in the future and with it lower carbon emissions. And I know that doesn't sound right. How could less people dying of a disease lower the population? Well, data shows that birth rates decrease when children are more likely to survive into adulthood in a society. It's a mentality shift that is hard to understand if you live in a first world country. But if you need your children to help you grow crops or keep your family business going or just, help keep a roof over everyone's head in some developing nation and kids die a lot, you're likely to hedge your bet to have more kids than you need in case a few die because they probably will. Like how it was in America when people were homesteading. In 2011, Gates told Forbes magazines that when he first entered public health, he wanted to focus on contraception. This, too, signaled to the conspiracists that he was always focused on depopulation. But in the interview, Gates quickly clarifies that when he saw data suggesting that mortality rates falling correlate with falling birth rates, which I just referenced, Gates shifted his focus from preventing births to saving people who were already alive. We moved pretty heavily into vaccines once we understood that, he told Forbes, and he's said versions of that to many publications. But that was enough ammunition for conspiracy theorists who linked vaccines with the former rumors about Gates' population control to arrive at the Bill Gates vaccine conspiracy theory we've all seen flavors of on social media today, that he helped create a deadly vaccine to cull the herd. Social media is rife with clips of Gates allegedly admitting to these nefarious activities. On January 21st, 2016, the dubious news and conspiracy theory site Your Newswire, now News Punch, published an article with the headline, Bill Gates admits vaccines are best way to depopulate. The article opened with a damning assertion. Bill Gates has openly admitted that vaccinations are designed so that governments can depopulate the world. To support this claim, the site presented a February 2011 video clip of Bill Gates being interviewed by CNN's Sanjay Gupta about his foundation's vaccination efforts. And Dr. Gupta asks or says, $10 billion over the next 10 years to make it the year of the vaccines. What does that mean exactly? Gates responds, over this decade, we believe unbelievable progress can be made in both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them. We only need about 6 or 7 more, and then you would have all the tools to reduce childhood death, reduce population growth, and everything, the stability, the environment benefits from that. A video online in 2022 would further allege that the foundation's first name was the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control, which is false. And I could go on to show how the conspiracy crowd takes Gates' quotes and actions out of context to fuel the narrative that he's an evil Illuminati leader who wants to kill as many of the world's poor people as he can. I won't do that. Instead, I'll just pose the question of motive. Why? What does Bill Gates have to gain by killing millions and millions of poor people around the world, if not billions? It's not going to increase his wealth. It's not going to free up precious land he wants. He can already buy millions of acres if he chooses. It's not going to help ensure he'll live longer. Even if the population kept increasing at the rate it did in the 20th century, we'll still have plenty of food for everyone of means for the rest of Bill's life, even if he lived until the age of 150. So what's the angle? That he's a serial killer who doesn't want to kill up close and also wants to kill millions instead of dozens? Okay, then why have his actions saved millions of lives? Nothing about any of this makes any sense. Unless you are an idiot of the internet.
Idiots of the internet.
Always fun to bring that segment back. This segment, Hail Nimrod. For today, I've gone to Bill's own YouTube channel. Yeah, Bill's he's a YouTuber. He's not, but he has his own YouTube channel. I'm guessing he's not doing the editing of the videos himself, but I wish he was. It's fun to think about. I wish he was just doing selfie style videos of like random product reviews, just like reactions to stuff, little funny skits. No, he's talking about his foundation. Anyway, on February 13th, 2018, he posted a 2-minute, 5-second long clip titled "Does Saving More Lives Lead to Overpopulation?" It has over 3.7 million views as I record this. It's so short, let me just play it for you in its entirety before sharing a couple of the 39,000 plus comments below this video.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers.
So I gotta pause it. Doesn't he just sound like a guy who has made a ton of money off of computers? I love that about him. Melinda and I have just talked about, I don't even remember what he said there. We get asked and give our answers. Like he has like, it's like out of a fucking central casting, like out of a movie. Like this is how a nerd should talk. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. Nerd is a good thing, but fucking kills me the way he talks.
One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible. Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster.
Mm-hmm.
So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down, and so we can feel great about saving those lives.
Now, you might not think, I know it sounds like he just got cut off there, but that is how the video ends. You might not think that he said anything nefarious there, and you'd be right. You also might think that his words could not possibly be twisted into something nefarious, but you'd be wrong. I would guess that around 50% of the nearly 40,000 comments under this video are from people who either hate Bill Gates and think he's evil, or who at least think he's lying about what he's saying and trying to manipulate us, because he's part of some fucking secretive cabal. And I would bet my life that not a single person leaving a negative or otherwise critical comment has done even 1%, even a tenth of 1% of what Bill has done to help the world. At Fanita8246 is pissed off that he's just talking about this, just in general. Apparently they feel that no one should ever fucking talk about population control. Not ever. No one has the right. They wrote, who is he to talk about population control? Who gives him the right to do that? A lot of exclamation points. This comment gets 251 likes. Okay, I'm pretty sure we all, as long as we live in a free country, have the right to, talk about population control or just about anything else. That's a fucking weird. You're a weird person. That's a weird reaction. We should be able to talk about everything. Who gives him the right to discuss this? Where are you from? At Kevin Pond 3983 writes, how about if Bill Gates stops trying to save everyone, wink, wink, and keeps his nose out of it all? You're right, Kevin. He should for sure stop saving literally millions of kids' lives, you fucking loser, you mindless tool. Thanks for showing up. At Amy Dick 5675 posts, this sounds so sad and ridiculous. Having families and children is what makes life so worth living and beautiful. Talking about population control sounds so dehumanizing. Did you even fucking listen to the video, Amy? He literally said nothing about, imposing limits on people's ability to have kids. He said the study showed that people on average choose, they want to have less kids when kids overall are healthier. And that's why he feels okay about saving, kids' lives now with vaccines and also then saving kids' lives later by helping curb an unsustainable amount of population growth. Also, what a slap in the face your comment is to anyone who chooses not to have kids or can have kids. Kids are not what makes or what make life worth living. And I say that as a parent. How sad you can't fucking look inside yourself to find what makes life beautiful. A life with kids can be beautiful. I love having kids, but I also believe that a life without kids can also be beautiful. Don't be so fucking simplistic. At AMKS.9423 is not great with words, but they decide to not let that stop them from posting, like a lot of other people in the comment section. If this is okay, then will Gates not allowed to have medical to himself and family before thinking about others' life? Literally no fucking clue what they're talking about there. There's one reply underneath this comment from @Eaton with extra E's. I'll just say Eaton to make it easier. Who posts again in a language? Yes, Eaton, well said. At U2 Franklin also did not seem to listen to the video. He chose to leave a comment under. He posts, or they post, I don't know who he is. What a sinister plan. This guy is scary. He doesn't impress. He doesn't impress me. Wow. Talk about not easily impressed. Bill Gates doesn't impress you? I mean, who the fuck is going to impress? Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever, dude. He started a corporation to change the world in ways almost no one has ever done. And he became the richest person on earth for many, many years. And, and he fucking created the software that I have, used many times myself to make my life work. But I would call that impressive. And what video did you watch, numbnuts? He literally said nothing sinister. A lot of brains in this comment section in desperate need of some fucking tune-ups. At Trap House Zombie 8003. Post something dumb as well, writing, why do people with a lot of money think they know everything? Oh, Trap House. I don't think Bill Gates does think he knows everything. Never has made a claim like that to my knowledge. But he has been smart enough to save tens of millions of lives and help invent and market a product that has revolutionized life on Earth. What the fuck have you done? Also, he is speaking about the subject because he has studied this subject a lot for many years. Probably more than you have ever studied any subject in your entire life. Getting strong Dunning-Kruger effect vibes from old fucking crack werewolf or heroin boogeyman or whatever the fuck his handle was. At Eaton is back in the comments, replying to this one with, vague. Did you disagree with something in the video? Yeah, Trap House. Try and focus for God's sake. No response from Trap House. At Eaton is dominating this comment section, by the way. At Theory of Personality posted something that Eaton will not let slide. They wrote, the truth is people are getting sicker, not better. At Eaton, right there again with, not true, look it up. Then Tweak 203 joins the conversation, clearly thinking they could shut Eaton down when they post, looked it up on several search engines. Disease is far worse now than it was. We are truly getting sicker. This should not be happening. What do you think is causing this? At Eaton, not going to accept Tweak's bullshit here. They come right back with, at Tweak 203, are you American? Do you think the U.S. is the only country in the world? Global disease rates have dropped dramatically in the last 50 years. Infant mortality has dropped dramatically. Longevity has increased. Maybe you were looking up the wrong thing? Fuck yeah, Tweak fuck. What are you searching, you half-wit? At Tweak 203, not done. Now they think they have Eaton by the balls, replying with, I am going off of global humans as a whole. That's kind of a weird sentence. I'm going off of global humans as a whole. I don't think you need to say as a whole if you say global humans. Not just United States. Yes, every country is different. But you don't have at Eaton by the balls, at Tweak 203. You fell right into at Eaton's trap. They come right back with at Tweak 203. Well, then you'll be pleased to know you're mistaken. Global disease rates have dropped dramatically in the last 50 years. Infant mortality has dropped dramatically. Longevity has increased. Disagree? Mic drop. Did you not hear at Eaton the first fucking time with that info? At Tweak 203? Couldn't hang with the truth. Left the comment section. Next up, at Skydiving Squid posted, sad to see in 2020 this man shift from data to propaganda. And guess who's there to shut this squid the fuck up? Yes, that's right, at Eaton. Coming correct with vague conspiracy nonsense. One more. At Michael Gonzo 9916 posted. Let's start with you, Billy boy. Dive headfirst into the shallow end of one of your pools. Who the fuck is not going to let that comment slide? You know it. At Eden back in the game. With start what? Improving his life? Then Den8267 joins the conversation, thinking they need to bring some clarity to At Eden. With At Eden, he's talking about depopulation, all caps. Just like Bill and Ben Gates. What? Just like Bill Gates? He is Bill Gates. And who's Ben Gates? At Eden replies to this reply with at Den8267, can you give me a timestamp for the bit where he talks about depopulation? Fucking silence! At Eden is a logic assassin. Hail at Eden. Single-handedly skewering so many idiots of the internet who just see what they want to see, hear what they want to hear, not hear what is actually being said or see what is actually there to witness. Ugh.
Idiots of the internet.
Bill Gates is not the only candidate for the leader of the Illuminati. Not the only possible man leading the let's kill the undesirables charge. There's another big guy when it comes to population control, according to Conspiracies. George Soros. Born Georg Schwartz on August 12, 1930. Soros is a Hungarian-American hedge fund manager and philanthropist. He was born to a Jewish family in Budapest, survived the Nazi. My gosh, I have the worst heartburn. Sorry, I had this. It's so random. Apparently, I can't drink fucking tea, certain kinds of tea. So I had some kind of tea earlier today, and I have nonstop heartburn ever since. He was born to a Jewish family in Budapest, survived the Nazi occupation of Hungary as a teenager, partially by his family changing their name to Soros to hide the fact that they were Jewish, and also by his family buying forged documents to prove they were Christian. Shortly after surviving the war, he moved to the UK in 1947 at the age of just 17. After graduating with a degree from the London School of Economics, he wanted to be a professor, but his grades were not good enough, and he went into finance. He would get to start working in British and American merchant banks and then set up his first hedge fund, Double Eagle, in 1969 with $4 million in investment capital, $250,000 of which was his money. Profits from this fund provided the seed money for Soros Fund Management, his second hedge fund in 1970. Double Eagle was renamed Quantum Fund and was the principal firm Soros advised. At its founding, Quantum Fund had $12 million in assets under management. As of 2011, after decades of very successful investing, it had $25 billion. The majority of Soros' overall net worth. That's some insane wealth growth. One might say very suspicious who sold their soul to the devil growth. And making it all seem that much more suspicious to those who don't understand how financial markets can work, Soros made a good chunk of that money in just a single day. Black Wednesday, or the 1992 sterling crisis, was a financial crisis that occurred on September 16, 1992, when the UK government was forced to withdraw sterling, the currency of the UK, from the first European exchange rate mechanism, following a failed attempt to keep its exchange rate above the lower limit required for ERM participation. To get into the weeds of all that would be to present a very long and for many very boring technical story, so let's skip to the end. George Soros was betting that sterling would fail, that it would crash. He'd been building a huge short position in sterling that would become immensely profitable if the currency ever fell below that ERM cutoff. And he did that because he believed the rate at which the United Kingdom was brought into the exchange rate mechanism, was too high. Inflation was too high, triple the German rate, and British interest rates were hurting their asset prices. He studied markets for years, was using historical evidence to infer what might be happening right around the corner. He believed in himself, and he bet very big on his belief. Soros shorted the market, which is basically borrowing an asset from a lender, then quickly selling it before you think the price is going to drop. Then, after the price has fallen, you buy the asset back at that lower price, return that asset to the lender, and pocket the money you earned when you sold the asset at its higher price. It would be like borrowing a pound of gold from someone when the price of gold is, say, $100 an ounce for even numbers. Then you sell that pound for $1,600. Then after you sell it, the price of gold drops to $10 an ounce. Now you buy that same gold back for $160 total for 16 ounces, then give the gold back to whoever you borrowed it from, and now you keep the $1,440 in profit that you made, $1,440. It's risky because if the price rises before you have to buy it back under the agreed terms of how long you can borrow it, well, then you can lose your ass. But Soros did not lose his ass. Soros made more than $1 billion on that day alone. That day, Soros also became known as the man who broke the Bank of England. In his later years, Soros would turn his mind away from, or has turned his mind away from just making as much money as humanly possible to philanthropy. He began his philanthropy in 1979, giving scholarships to black South Africans under apartheid, like an evil fuck is wont to do. In the 1980s, he helped promote the open exchange of ideas in communist Hungary by funding academic visits to the West and supporting fledgling independent cultural groups as well as other initiatives. What an evil son of a bitch! After the fall of the Berlin Wall, he created Central European University as a space to foster critical thinking, which at that time was an alien concept for most universities in the former communist bloc. Satan clearly working through him. With the Cold War over, he gradually expanded his philanthropy to more of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the U.S., supporting a vast array of new efforts to create more accountable, transparent, and democratic societies. He was one of the early prominent voices to criticize the war on drugs as arguably more harmful than the drug problem itself. Fuck yeah. And helped kickstart America's medical marijuana movement like the devil worshiper he is. In the early 2000s, he also became a vocal backer of same-sex marriage efforts. A monster fighting for sexual equality. But by far his biggest bit of philanthropy came with the founding of the Open Society Foundations. According to their website, a network of foundations, partners, and projects in more than 120 countries. Our name and work reflect the influence on Soros' thinking of the philosophy of Karl Popper, which Soros first encountered at the London School of Economics. In his book, Open Society and Its Enemies, Popper argued that no philosophy or ideology is the final arbiter of truth, and that societies can only flourish when they allow for democratic governance, freedom of expression, and respect for individual rights, an approach at the core of the Open Society Foundation's work. What a demon! Worse, clearly, than any serial killer we have ever covered. In 2017, the Open Society Foundations announced that Soros had transferred $18 billion of his fortune towards funding the future work of the foundations, bringing his total giving to the foundation since 1984 to over $32 billion. From this, we can see that the Open Society Foundation gives literally billions and billions of dollars, like the Gates Foundation, to everything from education to development to political think tanks and more. And why is he doing all of this? What's he up to? Speculating here, but I think I know why people this wealthy donate so much. For me, it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The pyramid of needs. They're at the top of this hierarchy, the self-actualization portion. They've done everything else, right? They have the most security one can have as a human, financially. All their basic needs are met, and then some. They've made all the money, enough for their entire family to never have to worry about money for many, many generations. They've gotten all the ego recognition for being a big dick titan of industry. They climbed to the top. They've been able to buy literally whatever they want to buy, whatever you can buy for years. And when you've done all that, you know, what's left? To try and rebuild the world as you see fit, I think. I mean, wouldn't you do that too? Don't we all think, at least a little bit, about what the world would look like if we had the power to change it? Well, the big difference between people like George Soros and almost all of the rest of us is that they actually do have that power, and they're using it. And that's not necessarily nefarious. It's just maybe not how you would use it. Having a different vision doesn't make a vision, inherently evil. And though it's merely given a fraction of the money, he's given, has been, oh my God. And though it's merely a fraction of the money he's given that has been given to fund support of reproductive health, sorry, it's a little clunky. That is what many conspiracy theorists look at when accusing Soros of population control. Worth noting here that Soros has been the focus of all sorts of conspiracy theories for decades, not just about population control, but about everything from secretly controlling the economy as part of the Illuminati or the Freemasons or the Bilderbergers, tri-lateralists, whatever, or being behind the European migrant crisis. Donald Trump, Alex Jones, Roseanne Barr, many others have accused Soros of being behind protests like the George Floyd protest, the 2017 Women's March, numerous protests against gun violence, and so much more. They painted him as, this evil leftist puppet master who's just a terrible person doing lots of good things, but whatever. Major world leaders in Hungary, Turkey, and others have accused Soros of destabilizing their countries with his wacky ideas regarding democracy and equality. But back to population control. In 1998, Soros' foundation gave a large grant to one group to protect the laws governing reproductive health care, especially abortions. A grant to another group to support public opinion research and field organizing in Colorado and Washington states to combat anti-choice activities. And a $1 million grant to the Planned Parenthood Federation of America for a campaign to gain widespread public awareness and acceptance of emergency contraception. All, as we've seen with Gates, par for the course, and very suspicious to conspiracy-minded folks. But the billionaires can't change the world with money alone. They need political connections as well. And who do they look towards in that regard? Why, the UN, of course. Those evil fuckers! The UN has long been the enemy of the conspiratorial crowd, seen as the public face of the secretive one world government Illuminati. Who are they really? The United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945, currently made up of 193 member states. The UN and its work are guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter. Or at least, that's what it says on its propaganda-filled website. The stated purpose of the organization is to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and serve as a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. It's the world's largest international organization, and maybe its evilest. Conspiracy theorists point to a plan the UN made in 1992 as evidence of its nefarious schemes. In 1992, the UN introduced Agenda 21, a non-binding contract, where so-called sustainable developmental goals set to be achieved in 2021 were laid down. Agenda 21 provided a comprehensive plan for global, national, and local action for sustainable development, prioritizing natural ecosystems while also developing urban areas. Part of all of this had to do, unsurprisingly, with the population. Agenda 21 states, the growth of world population and production combined with unsustainable consumption patterns places increasingly severe stress on the life-supporting capacities of our planet. Yeah, that just makes sense, actually. Makes a lot of sense. The ball is only so big. Earth can only sustain so much life. The resources are, in fact, finite. This UN plan does not propose any population action. Indeed, its stated goals completely omit the need to end population growth. The agenda was adopted by more than 178 governments at the UN Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED, held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in June of 1992. But it was soon pretty obvious that these problems would not be solved in just 3 decades. So, Agenda 2030 was created in its place, with very similar goals, like ending world hunger and gender inequality, lowering poverty rates, and stopping climate change and the loss of biodiversity, all wrapped up into 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The short titles of these 17 SDGs are very evil. Check out how disgusting and horrific these goals are. No poverty. Ugh. Zero hunger. What? Good health and well-being. Gross. Quality education. Get the fuck out of here. Gender equality? Not on my watch. Clean water and sanitation. Affordable and clean energy. Decent work and economic growth. Industry innovation and infrastructure. Reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, ocean biodiversity, life on land, biodiversity, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and partnerships for the goals. Who fucking wrote that? The devil himself? Each goal typically has 8 to 12 targets, and each target has between 1 and 4 indicators used to measure progress toward reaching the targets, with the average of 1.5 indicators per target. And that plan was launched in 2015. To state the obvious, the goals are ambitious, and the reports and outcomes to date indicate a challenging path. Most, if not all, of the goals are very unlikely to be met by 2030, and funding is still an ongoing challenge. If implemented, this plan would have effects on population, just not directly. Without the implementation of this plan, the UN's projections showed that the world's population would grow to around 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050. They projected it to reach a peak of around 10.4 billion during the 2080s and remain at that level until 2100. And it's not necessarily surprising that some of these goals directly or indirectly would curb population growth. Stuff like reducing child mortality and improving access to maternal health resources, as we learned with Bill Gates, that would indirectly lead to families having less kids. One analysis showed that meeting the Agenda 2030 goals would result in the world population peaking around 2060 and reaching 8.2 to 8.7 billion by 2100, depending on the specific SDG scenario. And that raised the ears of conspiracy theorists. Could it be possible that the secret mission, or that the mission that's not exactly stated secretly at all, in fact, of Agenda 2030, could be population control? A website called pop.org, the so-called Population Research Institute, claims that's exactly the case. PRI warns people on the looming depopulation crisis, which even includes the slipping birth rate in the U.S., the website reads. RI also monitors the progression of ideologically driven agendas pushed by powerful leaders or organizations such as the UN that involve population control and human rights violations. On pop.org, you can learn about the United Nations' decades of funding population control and where UN leaders are heading now with Agenda 2030. On the site's weekly briefing, you can see headlines like, "Discover why Elon Musk believes depopulation is the single biggest threat to humanity." "Uncover the Chinese Communist Party's goals for global domination under leader Xi Jinping in his unprecedented third term." "Understand the overturn of Roe versus Wade and how pro-life groups can continue to advance in America despite violent pushback." Find out how George Soros spun a web of lies involving climate change and population control. They tout their president, Stephen Mosher, as an internationally recognized expert on China. In 1979, he was the first American social scientist allowed into the People's Republic of China and exposed the communist regime's brutal forced abortions that occurred under its one-child policy. This site is about ending abortions a lot more than it's about providing data or stats about population control. Agenda 2030 is part of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and includes promotion of population control programs, the website goes on to say. Based on outdated research from Paul Ehrlich's debunked book, The Population Bomb, Agenda 2030 causes unsustainable development. It depopulates the planet and eliminates the future of humanity. At PRI, we are pro-people, pro-family, and pro-life, and promote the truth that people are the world's greatest resource. Many of their weekly briefings are newsletters about various people they accuse of promoting abortion. And they praise teachers who teach against Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Writing the students look at how these thinkers gave rise to a mindset that sees humans as disposable, which in turn contributes to pressing bioethical issues from abortion to euthanasia. From this knowledge, they become equipped to not just reject, but argue against the kinds of abuses that emerge from a callous disregard for the gift of life. What this site does not do is lean on science at all. None. Which is very typical for the conspiracy crowd. They lean on conjecture, magical thinking, much harder than they ever lean on facts and stats, data, and such. And a lack of not leaning on, facts, data, etc., never seems to prevent them from feeling like they know the truth. And with the onset of the COVID pandemic, many of them became convinced that the truth was that depopulation Illuminati folks were entering a new phase of culling the human herd. Beginning in 2020, a lot of users on social media began suggesting that a global framework for sustainable development named Agenda 2030 was proof that the COVID-19 pandemic was part of a massive murderous conspiracy. An example post includes screenshots from a UK government speech that references Agenda 2030. The post reads, "Still a conspiracy? They don't even hide their plans and intentions from you. Yet you still turn a blind eye because the media don't shove it in your face. Pandemic. Lie." Another post from Facebook user Vernon Atkinson went, all caps, "This is not a conspiracy theory." Lowercase. "If you don't believe it, a simple Google search will take you to the UN website where you can access the document and read it for yourself. It is amazing." Not how well the COVID-19 pandemic ties in with Agenda 21/Agenda 2030. It kills me when people in the recent years still use the not. It's just a very specific personality. "It's amazing. Not." you don't need to hit the hard not. I think we'll get your satire if you're clear enough with it, or sarcasm. It's unclear if this is the same Vernon Atkinson who appeared on the Discovery show Bering Sea Gold. Also, the word plandemic also cracks me up. Some plan, right? Fuck up the world's economies for a few years and not actually thin the population out very much at all. I found a breakdown of COVID deaths in the U.S. by age from the beginning of the plandemic to June 14th, 2023. 603,613 people died, right, who were over the age of 75. Another 254,710 died who were between the age of 65 and 74. Finally, another 254,720 people died between the age of 50 and 64. How many under the age of 49 died? 74,378. And only 8,607 of those people under the age of 30. And many of those who died under the age of 50, not physically healthy people. They had health complications. If the Illuminati wanted to thin the herd, why the fuck would they create such a comparatively weak virus that almost never kills young and healthy people, the breeders? Why focus primarily on killing the elderly, people who are past reproductive age, right? People with health problems, people, not likely to have kids, people, dying in the near future anyway. They wouldn't fucking do that. especially because most of the world's wealthiest people are not under 50 years old. Bill Gates is 68. George Soros is 93. Why would he help create a virus that mostly kills people like him? If COVID was actually part of some depopulation plan, it would have been a virus that killed the young and healthy people in fucking droves. Anyway, whoever this Vernon Halfwood is, he would claim that items in Agenda 2030 included a one world government, a single cashless currency, government-owned and controlled schools, colleges, universities, and an end to single-family homes. That's a weird one. An end to single-family homes? We must only allow the poor to live in large groups together. That'll teach them. Also, as someone who likes to travel, how nice would it be if you could use the same currency everywhere? I mean, seriously. I'm not even pushing for that, but it sounds kind of nice. And at some point in the future, isn't a one-world government inevitable? Right? Empire building has always been a part of the overall human experience, right? The Mongols built a massive trying to take over the world empire. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian did the same. The Romans did the same. The British took over roughly a quarter of the world, geographically and population-wise at their height. What's next? What's next is for someone to claim the real Iron Throne, right? The next ambitious leader to take over the entire world. I mean, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I don't think it's possible in the next, even century or two maybe, but like someday. In the actual 2030 plan, there are brief mentions of some of the topics in the conspiracy theory, but not the way Vernon thinks. The term central banking is present in reference to capacity building in developing countries. It is not described as a world central bank. Property rights are also addressed regarding protecting women's rights to property, but not an end to all privately owned property. But what's real, right, has never stopped the conspiracy theorist crowd. Now, with all that said, speaking of pandemics, let's get into our first category of population control mechanisms, which I've already touched on, disease. Disease. When you think of something that can easily wipe out a chunk of the population and look utterly random, the first pick seems kind of obvious, right? Disease. It's something that even the first population thinkers, way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, thought about when they looked at population. Some of our earliest writings about plague tells us that conspiracy thinkers will think a lot, things that conspiracy thinkers will think a lot about further down the line. Things like the issue of responsibility and motive. Who created the plague? Why? The first answer was, unsurprisingly, in the days before our understanding of germs and transmission, God. The book of Exodus, chapters 7 through 11, mention a series of 10 plagues to strike the Egyptians before the Israelites, held in captivity by the Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, are finally released. Similar plagues were described and referred to in Islamic tradition in chapter 7 of the Quran. In the book of Revelation, 7 bowls of God's wrath will be poured on the earth by angels, and some of the bowls contain plagues that are likely infectious in nature. So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast. Revelation 16:2. Those examples show how, from our earliest conceptions of what plagues are, humanity has recognized their innate ability to upend the social dynamic of groups, destabilize or destroy governments, and plunge the world into chaos. And if you're a billionaire, you want to destroy everything, right? Because, you're just evil. Here's some more problems with the Illuminati spreading a planned lethal virus. They could catch it and die themselves, right? A plandemic only works out for the wealthy elite if they first inoculate themselves against it, which I know is not impossible. But in order to keep living your luxurious, wealthy lifestyle, you have to make sure a lot of other people also don't die. Not just your buddies, not just the people in your immediate, elite social circle. Which you also want to keep alive, right? What's the point in having a huge yacht if you can't show it off to your elite friends? But how are you going to have that yacht, fixed, maintained, built in the fucking first place? How are you going to have a new yacht if your disease kills the people who build yachts? If your disease kills the people who crew yachts, who kills people who fucking work as mechanics on yachts? And how are you going to drive or fly your yacht if your disease has killed your pilot, your chauffeur, the people who build and repair your car and plane? What about your doctor, your dentist, your cosmetic surgeon, your housekeepers, your landscapers, your security guards? What about your personal chef, your personal trainer, the people who fucking run the gym you go to, the people who run your favorite restaurants, the people who build a fucking movie theater where you like to go from time to time, the people who clean your pool, your masseuse, right? If those people die, you don't get to live in luxury anymore. Why would you want to fuck your life up like that? Historically, widespread death due to disease has not worked out well for the elites. During the years of 1346 to 1353, the Black Death claimed the lives of somewhere around 50 million people in Europe and the Mediterranean, reducing populations by somewhere around 30% according to most estimates, and all that death marked as like the end of the feudal system. Right? The massive labor shortage caused by the plague meant that peasants had more land, craftsmen had fewer competitors, new labor-saving technology spread to compensate for the loss of so much of the labor force, and feudal lords had to compete for peasants' loyalty lest they switch allegiance to a new lord offering a better deal, right? Because there's a labor shortage, while the Roman Catholic Church faced a severe crisis in confidence as prayer seemed wholly ineffective at stopping the ravages of the plague, and they were losing a shitload of tithes since many of the congregation kept dying. Plagues are fucking bad for business. The Europe that emerged from the Black Death was not the old one that had been dominated by the elites of the medieval era, but conversely, one with a leveled playing field where the elite's power was sharply curtailed and where agricultural, industrial, economic, religious, and intellectual revolutions loomed around the bend. Now let's move forward to the modern era. Perhaps no disease would kick off modern conspiracy disease association more than HIV/AIDS. HIV infections in the U.S., first noticed in the early 1980s. Those studies now show that HIV may have jumped from chimpanzees to humans as far back as the late 1800s, when hunters became exposed to infected blood. The chimpanzee version of the virus is called simian immunodeficiency virus. Over the decades, HIV slowly spread across Africa and later into other parts of the world. The earliest known case of infection with HIV-1 in a human, detected in a blood sample collected in 1959 from a man in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of the Congo. In 1982, public health officials began to use the term acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS, to describe new occurrences of opportunistic infections. Kaposi sarcoma, a very specific kind of cancer, pneumocystis pneumonia in previously healthy people. Formal tracking of AIDS cases began that year in the U.S. In 1983, scientists discovered the virus that causes AIDS, HIV. Scientists know for sure that HIV was not created in a lab, or so they say. Scientists trace cousins of the U.S. HIV virus all the way back to Africa and then back to those chimpanzees. But that's not what some people believe. Ever since the disease was identified and became public knowledge, some believe that the virus was engineered and deliberately released into the world. The most popular theory suggesting that the disease was engineered by the government or military contractors and released into the population via vaccinations, drug tests, and even routine checkups. Many such theories trace back to a 1985 article by a German biologist named Jacob Siegel. Siegel, a professor at Humboldt University in then East Germany, proposed that HIV was engineered at a U.S. military laboratory at Fort Detrick by splicing together two other viruses, Visna and HTLV-1. According to his theory, based on literally no evidence, just conjecture, the new virus, created between 1977 and 1978, was tested on prison inmates who had volunteered for the experiment in exchange for early release. He further suggested that it was through these prisoners that the virus then spread to the population at large. At the end of the Cold War, however, former KGB agents Vasily Mitrokhin and Oleg Gordivsky independently revealed that this Fort Detrick hypothesis was a propaganda operation devised by the KGB's first chief directorate, codenamed Operation Infection. Fucking Russia. Always stirring the pot. This revelation was later supported by Officer Gunther Bonsack of Section X of East Germany's main directorate for reconnaissance. But Siegel seemed to gain credit at the time because others were just hopping on his conspiracy bandwagon and ignoring this other information. A retired dermatologist named Alan Cantwell self-published a series of books advancing a similar thesis in the late 80s, while a dentist named Leonard Horowitz suggested that the AIDS crisis had resulted from government-mandated vaccinations. These unfounded ideas found a zealous audience among marginalized communities that were disproportionately affected by the disease. In the 1991 classic piece of literature, Behold a Pale Horse, radio broadcaster and heralded author, critically acclaimed author, being very sarcastic, Milton William Cooper first proposed that HIV AIDS was a result of a conspiracy to decrease the populations of blacks, Hispanics, and gay people. This book's cover, by the way, looks like it was illustrated by a marginally artistically talented 9-year-old using crayons. Nevertheless, this theory would find support in organizations like the Nation of Islam, which endorses that the U.S. government sponsored the creation and spread of HIV. We've talked about the Nation of Islam before. They're an interesting bunch. Even former South African President Thabo Mbeki once touted the theory, disputing scientific claims that the virus originated in Africa and accusing the U.S. government of manufacturing the disease in military labs. That sound familiar? Sound like all the people talking about how the Chinese government made COVID in the lab, or the U.S. government, or fucking whoever? Come on, why? Again, why make a virus that is mostly fatal in the 80-plus crowd? If you're thinking to make vaccine money, that's why they did it, to make that money. There is a logic to that possibility for sure, but there are easier ways for them to make billions, like creating the opioid epidemic. You can only push vaccines and booster shots on the public, once or twice a year, realistically. But you can sell pain medication over and over and over again, year after year, to the same people. Do I think those fuckers were happy to make billions and billions off the world's misery? Yes, I think that. I also wouldn't put it past Big Pharma to create a virus that kills millions to make billions or trillions. I think a lot of those Sackler-type execs are completely soulless, and I would love to see most of the Purdue Pharma top execs, from the time they knowingly pushed the highly addictive drug OxyContin on the public to be executed. Fuck those bare, evil bastards. I just don't think they made COVID. Neither does the scientific community. Back to AIDS now. One study in the early 2000s found in a random door-to-door survey of African Americans in California that 27% of them endorsed the belief that HIV AIDS is a man-made virus that the federal government made to kill and wipe out black people. And a further 23% were unsure. So half of the people interviewed, either believed this conspiracy or were open to believing it. That study also noted that HIV AIDS conspiracy beliefs were significantly associated with negative condom attitudes and inconsistent condom use. The best way of protecting against all sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS. Pretty funny to think about conspiratorial-minded people, worried that shadowy forces are trying to kill them, but then also not going to wear condoms. Maybe not the most rational, decision-making people in this example. Also, if AIDS was created by some secret evil group, why didn't it kill, more people? Worldwide, AIDS has killed about 40 million people, which is a lot, but in the past 45-ish years, less than 1 million a year. Globally, that is not enough to make a dent in the population. And why is it so treatable now if it was made to thin the herd? There is some historical basis, I will say, for African Americans worrying that the government would secretly infect them with a disease that is fatal, though, because that has for sure happened. It happened for decades with the infamous and just disgusting, despicable 40-year-long Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male experiment conducted from 1932 to 1972 by the U.S. Public Health Service, in which 399 black men with syphilis, most illiterate sharecroppers, were denied curative treatment so that researchers could follow the progression of the disease. Fucking dark as shit. Let's move on to another plague now, the Zika virus. Not really a plague, but that's how it's been framed by the conspiracy crowd. Zika virus is a mosquito-borne virus first identified in Uganda in 1947 in a rhesus macaque monkey. I like to say rhesus macaque monkey. Followed by evidence of infection and disease in humans and other African countries in the 1950s. From the 1960s to 1980s, sporadic human infections were detected across Africa and Asia. Since 2007, outbreaks of Zika virus have been recorded in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. Zika primarily spread by the female yellow fever mosquito, which are active mostly in the daytime. Zika can also be transmitted from men and women to their sexual partners. Most known cases involve transmission from symptomatic men to women. There was a small epidemic in 2015 and 2016 in the Americas. The outbreak began in April of 2015 in Brazil, spread to other countries in South America, North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. In January of 2016, the WHO said that the virus was likely to spread throughout most of the Americas by the end of the year. And in February of 2016, the WHO declared the cluster of microcephaly, a condition where a baby is born with a much smaller than normal head, and Guillain-Barré syndrome, cases reported in Brazil, were strongly suspected to be associated with the Zika outbreak. Like with other plagues, conspiracy theorists immediately thought Zika was related to depopulation efforts. The two big baddies of most conspiracy theories, many have claimed that the Rothschild family and or the Rockefellers are responsible for the spread of the Zika virus. But again, why? What the fuck would they have to gain? This theory is laid out on one conspiracy website called Collective Evolution. That site claims that the Rockefeller Foundation owns the patent on the virus and that it was being sold throughout the world. Who's buying this virus? It's not even a super fatal virus. The connection with the Rothschild Foundation here is because the virus was originally found by scientists working for it. Scientists dropped off a sample of the virus taken from a rhesus monkey in Uganda in the repository in 1947. But the American-type culture collection, the actual thing conspiracy theorists are referring to, does not collect copyrights. It's in fact a very useful medical resource which stores and distributes microorganisms and other materials that allow companies and other researchers to inspect and build on existing knowledge. The other largely similar idea is that the British company called Oxitec was testing genetically engineered mosquitoes to stop the spread of the Zika virus, among other diseases. But those insects were actually spreading the disease either by accident or on purpose. depending on who you're talking to. And all of this is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, of course. That conspiracy emerged because of a Reddit post that pointed out the areas the mosquitoes were being released correlated with the areas that Zika outbreaks were happening. Both events pointed to a city called Juazeiro in Brazil. But the Reddit post had the wrong Juazeiro, pointing at a place 300 kilometers, about 180 miles away, and even the correct Juazeiro a long way from the places particularly affected by Zika, which are on the coast. And the dangerous outbreak in 2015 and 2016 didn't even come from that area. It's thought to have spread from an outbreak in 2013 in French Polynesia. And really, the Zika virus would be an incredibly inefficient way of wiping out populations, if that was the New World Order's aim. About 80% of the people who catch the virus never experience any symptoms. If they do, they'll almost certainly only feel like they have a bad flu, fever, headaches, so on, and then they'll be fine. It is not very fatal. Almost no one ever dies from this virus. The main reason to worry was the apparent effect that the Zika virus had on pregnant women. Their babies appeared to be being born with an increased incidence of microcephaly, or abnormally small heads, which I mentioned, which can lead to major problems in life. But even then, the Zika virus does not kill the children or the parents or lower the fertility rate in any direct way. It's likely that people in affected countries will have fewer children while the disease is raging as a way of looking to stave off its effects on their babies, but that would be an incredibly inefficient way of keeping the overall population down. Now let's focus more on the one we've all heard about. Many theories during the COVID-19 pandemic would hold that the disease spread was merely part of the plan for global extermination instilled upon us by the international globalist elite. According to one large UK study, 1 in 5 people believed that for a time. This was perhaps a misunderstanding of something called the Great Reset. Months after the beginning of the pandemic in June 2020, the discussion at the World Economic Forum was the Great Reset. The idea was this: to limit consumption in society worldwide, to work towards resolving the climate crisis, and to use the pandemic as an opportunity to redress social inequalities. According to Klaus Schwab, the crisis gave the world a perfect opportunity to take on a new path, since it drastically changed the way most people lived. And it has changed the world. In his speech, Schwab said that people might come to understand that they don't need as many material goods to achieve happiness, that they might reconsider the value of friendship, community, etc., over luxury goods. This call for decreasing consumerism led to the birth of another conspiracy. The Great Reset was seen as code for a plan to eliminate citizens' freedom to more successfully then exterminate them altogether. At the end of November 2020, this conspiracy theory gained popularity and it started to trend on Twitter, with over 80,000 believers at least pushing this around cyberspace. This time, the furor was generated by a speech given by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau during a UN summit. In his speech, he called the pandemic an opportunity for resetting people's worldview globally. But again, not enough people died to make this a worthwhile Illuminati depopulation endeavor. Okay, let's move out of pandemic territory for the moment. Maybe creating the pandemic is just too obvious. Maybe it would unintentionally kill too many people or not the right kind of people. So what if you could control how many people might be born in the future? This would logically be the most covert and long-term effective way for anyone to control a population, by taking away its ability to reproduce. And that means that conspiracy theorists have targeted anyone advocating for birth control or a reduced fertility rate, such as Bill Gates, going all the way back to activist Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was an American birth control activist, sex educator, writer, and nurse who popularized the term birth control in the early 1900s, opened the first birth control clinic, and established organizations that evolved into Planned Parenthood. She was an evil devil trollop who supported women's rights to have sex for fun instead of procreation. She was an Illuminati whore of Babylon who consistently refused to submit and wanted to enjoy a nice bicycle ride as much as a man. Disgusting. Also, her support for birth control was primarily aimed at increasing women's economic and political opportunities and preventing back alley abortions that would lead to the deaths of many women. And because she was actually a vocal opponent of abortion, she saw wide access to birth control as the best possible solution. She actually had firsthand experience with this. Her father, Michael Higgins, was a stonemason as well as an activist for women's suffrage and free public education. That should have meant that Margaret's mother, Ann Higgins, got access to things that may have been closed to him with less open-minded husbands, but biology reared his ugly head and conceived 18 times in 22 years, giving birth to 11 live babies in addition to 7 stillborns, before dying at the age of 49. Margaret was the 6th of 11 surviving children, many of them growing up without a mother. Margaret knew her mother might have lived longer had she had access to birth control and not destroyed her body. This belief would be reinforced by her experience as a nurse in the slums in New York's Lower East Side. Working with these impoverished women, she encountered story after story of frequent childbirth, miscarriages, and self-induced abortions because the women had no information about how to avoid unwanted pregnancy. These problems were epitomized in a story that Sanger would later recount in her speeches. While Sanger was working as a nurse, she was called to the apartment of a woman, Sadie Sachs, who had become extremely ill due to a self-induced abortion. Afterwards, Sadie begged the attending doctor to tell her how she could prevent this from happening again, to which the doctor simply advised her to be abstinent. His exact words and actions, apparently, were to laugh and then say, "You want your cake while you eat it too, do you? Well, it can't be done. I'll tell you the only sure thing to do. Tell Jake to sleep on the roof." What a guy. What a doctor. Sadie died a few months later as a result of complications with childbirth. And her story, not unique. When Margaret Sanger heard, she said she threw my nursing bag in the corner and announced that I would never take another case until I had made it possible for working women in America to have the knowledge to control birth. And she was demonized for this very good thing she was doing. In 1914, Sanger launched the Woman Rebel, an 8-page monthly newsletter which promoted contraception using the slogan, "No gods, no masters." Though federal obscenity laws ban the circulation of materials about female contraceptives. How fucking crazy is that? In the land of the free, federal law banned the circulation of material discussing how not to get pregnant. In August of 1914, Margaret Sanger was indicted for violating postal obscenity laws by sending the Woman Rebel through the postal system. She fled to England. Then her second husband, James Noah H. Slee, people know their long names back then, took up her cause, later smuggling diaphragms into New York through Canada in boxes labeled as 3-in-1 oil. Had to fucking smuggle diaphragms into America just a century ago. How fucking dare women trying to have sex but not get pregnant? After returning to the U.S. on October 16th, 1916, Sanger opened a family planning and birth control clinic at 46 Amboy Street in the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, the first of its kind in the U.S. 1921, Sanger founded the American Birth Control League, the forerunner to Planned Parenthood. Its mission stated, "We hold that children should be 1, conceived in love, 2, born of the mother's conscious desire." You know what? Let me restart this and read it in an evil voice. "We hold that children should be 1, conceived in love, 2, born of the mother's conscious desire, 3, and only begotten under conditions which render possible the heritage of health. Therefore, we hold that every woman must possess the power and freedom to prevent conception, except when these conditions can be satisfied." Sounds pretty fucking evil, or loving and logical. But how dare women be allowed to control their own bodies, right? How controversial. After World War I, Sanger, now having decades of experience working with the poor, increasingly posited a societal need to limit births by those least able to afford children. In her 1921 speech, The Morality of Birth Control, she divided society into 3 groups: the educated and informed class that regulated the size of their families, the intelligent and responsible who desired to control their families in spite of lacking the means or the knowledge, and the irresponsible and reckless people whose religious scruples prevent their exercising control over their numbers. Sanger concludes, "There is no doubt in the minds of all thinking people that the procreation of this group should be stopped." And you know what? Controversial, but I like Sanger. She didn't pull punches, right? Do what you want to do, what is obviously the right ethical humanist thing to do here. Or do you want to keep acting like, a fucking idiot? I know it's clunky again. Unfortunately, her stance aligned her unintentionally with a group of not so great people who shared some of her views, eugenicists. To be fair to Sanger, she never spoke to the idea of race or ethnicity being determining factors in unfitness. Instead, she stressed limiting the number of births to live within one's economic and physical ability to raise and support healthy children. In 1925, she would say, "If the millions of dollars which are now expended in the care and maintenance of those who in all kindness should never have been brought into this world were converted to a system of bonuses to unfit parents, paying them to refrain from further parenthood and continuing to pay them while they control their procreative faculties, this would not only be a profitable investment, but the salvation of American civilization." Sanger's eugenics policies included an exclusionary immigration policy, free access to birth control methods, and full family planning autonomy for the able-minded, as well as compulsory segregation or sterilization for the profoundly retarded, which is the way of just saying somebody with a severely oh my God, I can't think of the proper term currently for that. It's not mentally ill. My God, it's it's developmentally disabled. Jesus Christ. As the decades wore on, Margaret Sanger's name continued to be linked with the prospect of eugenics and thusly depopulation. And she's still the focus of conspiracy theories today. In 2015, Ben Carson, the then presidential hopeful, alleged in an interview with Fox News that Planned Parenthood puts most of its clinics in black neighborhoods to control the population. He was citing the letter that Sanger wrote to black community members in 1939, which said in part, we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. The letter was to a program director advocating employing black physicians and ministers to gain trust of the communities. Oh my God, I am getting new glasses, by the way, in the next few months. Employing black physicians and ministers to gain trust of the communities. A new program was meant to serve. All right, sorry. Sanger's concern was to avoid a suspicion that the program's objective was to stop black people having babies, which having white people in charge could create. Sorry, this is a very dense episode. Trying to get a lot of concepts out. And so in full, the quote goes, the minister's work is also important, and he should be trained perhaps by the Federation as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. But Carson, like many others, implied that Sanger was trying to keep a secret, right? Don't tell them we're trying to exterminate black people. Hee hee. In response, Planned Parenthood said Carson was not only wrong on the facts, he's flat out insulting. Alencia Johnson, the former assistant director of constituency communications, told NPR, does he think that black women are somehow less capable of making the deeply personal decision about whether to end a pregnancy than other women? It's a shame that a doctor, who should understand the barriers black women face accessing high-quality preventative and reproductive health care services, would pander so clearly to anti-abortion extremists on the right. And indeed, in 2014, the Guttmacher Institute, a reproductive health research center, surveyed all known abortion providers, including Planned Parenthood clinics in the U.S., nearly 2,000, and found that 60% are in majority white neighborhoods. Another way to reduce fertility, according to conspiracy theorists, might surprise you, gay people. Yeah, that's it. Just have more gay people. Since gay people are not able to reproduce, the shoddy wisdom goes, billionaires' support for gay rights is a direct reflection of their desire to depopulate the world. And they are able to reproduce, but they don't want to oftentimes. However, today, only 5.5% of adults in the U.S. identify as LGBT, about 13.9 million, according to the Williams Institute. Some numbers have things a little differently. Gallup finds 7.6% of U.S. adults identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or something other than straight or heterosexual. Still, less than 8% isn't going to really put a massive dent in the population, is it? Especially when some of those 8%, right? Some women are going to want to have a child anyway. They're going to be artificially inseminated. There are, ways for many people of this community to work around things to have kids. But conspiracy theorists point to the fact that the percentage has more than doubled since Gallup first measured LGBTQ plus identification in 2012. So why are there more gay people? It can't possibly be because the world is more accepting in general, could it? It couldn't be that, there actually aren't more gay people, that there have always been about the same percentage of gay people, but now far less are having to repress who they actually are and live a lie due to prejudice and social and legal backlash and punishment. No. Beginning in the 2010s, various media personalities promoted conspiracy theories claiming that exposure to endocrine disrupting chemical pollutants in the water supply are responsible for an alleged increase in the gay or transgender population. And this came from research in the 2000s that suggested that the herbicide atrazine may have a feminizing effect on male frogs, causing them to become hermaphrodites. However, other research failed to reproduce those results in frogs, though reports of reproductive impact have been reported for other animals, and a meta-analysis conducted in 2010 on selected amphibians and freshwater fish showed sublethal reproductive effects at ecologically relevant concentrations. It's a lot of big words. Still in 2015, our old friend Alex Jones claimed that atrazine had caused a majority of frogs in the U.S. to become homosexual, which is not true, and that the U.S. government was waging a chemical warfare operation to increase rates of homosexuality and decrease birth rates. One of the many things Alex has said that genius musicians on YouTube have turned into very catchy songs.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Turn the friggin' frogs gay. Serious crap. Gay. Frogs, friggin' frogs. It's not funny. I'm gonna say it real slow for you. Gay. Frogs.
So good. Love these remixes.
Won't you fight for your life?
The fact that Alex Jones has been so financially successful is very depressing. Sad that there's such a large audience for his just painfully dumb brand of idiotic nonsense. Scientific consensus, as summarized in a 2016 review in Psychological Science in the Public Interest, is that there is, quote, no persuasive evidence that the rate of same-sex attraction has varied much across time or place. Okay, so maybe it isn't the frogs. But what if elites could somehow just still convince you through something like advertising or rainbow merch to become gay? Because that makes sense, right? That advertising could somehow make you attracted to genitalia you once found repulsive. It's fucking nonsensical. Like I couldn't care less about homosexuality. Like I don't care who is gay, who's not gay. Very open-minded. You know, I've very like much an ally of this community, and also zero interest in putting a dick in my mouth. Like getting more empathetic as I've gotten older, more tolerant as I've gotten older, more accepting of different lifestyles has not made me want to put a dick in my mouth any more than it did when I was much more closed-minded at like 17, 18 years old. This makes no sense to me, this argument. But this is what some people think, right? That they can just market gay into you, right? That they can just make pride so fun that even if you found it repulsive before, now you're going to want a dick in your butt or whatever. Also, you know, if more people are gay, maybe there's some kind of like weird conspiracy logic that then the Illuminati gets more buttholes, or I don't know, more videos made of women licking each other's bicycle seats or something. According to one article at Catholic.org titled "Are Elites Pushing a Same-Sex Agenda for Population Control?" and published on June 19th of 2023, this kind of shit is exactly what is happening. Put some fucking conspiracy music on. In the present case, billionaires and their pet corporations are promoting the same-sex agenda. Just turn on the television in June to see all the same-sex couples engaged in everyday consumption to know which corporations support the same-sex agenda. And have a look at the tide of same-sex content on entertainment outlets. Some powerful people are pushing because the content requires their permission and funding to air. There are no smoking gun documents or statements that allow anyone to point directly to an organized, nefarious agenda. And of course not. The global elites are smarter than that. You do not show the axe to the chicken until the last moment after the chicken is in hand. However, that something is cooking is evident by the boiling pot and the smoke in the chimney and the cock in the butt. Maybe not that part. With all the same-sex propaganda bandied about, not to mention the merchandise, the rainbow logos, and the legal changes of the past few decades around the world, it is no error to say something is happening. We must stop it! Who will the priest have to fuck if they take... I'm sorry, wait, never mind. The logic behind the agenda is that it fits with the Great Reset mentality. Specifically, same-sex couples cannot procreate between themselves, at least not naturally. For this reason, it is sensible to encourage such behavior as a means of reducing the rate of population growth. It's just one plank in a much larger agenda. It is unclear if this agenda is successful in stemming population growth. The planet's population continues to increase, although in some nations the rising use of abortion, abortifacients, and contraceptives is having an impact. In more affluent nations, birth rates are in decline. But what if you couldn't have to, get people to agree to take birth control to reduce the population or make them gay? What if you couldn't do that? What if you could instead make them infertile? This strain of conspiracy thought about fertility abandons the accusations against family planning clinics and gay frogs and whatever, which are, pretty easily disproven, in favor of the much harder to prove idea that someone is trying to make people infertile and thus incapable of keeping the population at the current replacement rate. Dating back decades, various conspiracy theories have linked vaccination programs with infertility and thus harmed vaccination programs in Africa, Asia, and Central America, particularly against polio and tetanus, and a lot of people have died because of that. Vaccines certainly face the brunt of population control accusations, so let's head to them next. Like we said, when I covered Bill Gates up top, billionaires' support for vaccines for any number of diseases had led to their practically permanent association with population control. That link was created when Bill Gates spoke about his aim to fight overpopulation by providing vaccines. Not because the vaccines killed people, as conspiracy theorists would have you believe, but because parents in developing countries don't have to have large numbers of children if more of their children are surviving to adulthood. But still, the myth persists because, well, logic truly doesn't matter to so many people, does it? Some vaccines, conspiracy theorists say, target fertility in an attempt to reduce the population. A vaccine-related 2022 documentary directed by Dr. Andrew Wakefield, Infertility, a Diabolical Agenda, supposedly shines a light on long-standing depopulation efforts. The film tells the story of World Health Organization vaccination programs conducted in Africa and alleged to have intentionally resulted in infertility, sterilizing young girls and women of childbearing age in Kenya, first in 1995 and then again in 2014. Under the guise of two separate vaccination campaigns supposedly aimed at the prevention of neonatal tetanus, the WHO allegedly stripped millions of Kenyan women of their ability to carry pregnancy to term. Millions! Without their knowledge or consent. Neonatal tetanus is no joke. It's caused by a neurotoxin secreted by a bacterium that festers in a newly born baby's umbilical stump, typically because of the unsterile instruments or dressings when cutting the umbilical cord. And it used to cause half of all newborn deaths in many developing countries before immunization became widespread. This film argues that something much darker and more intentional took place than helping mothers and babies. The way the film tells it, vaccination with tainted tetanus vaccines prompted mothers' immune systems to mistakenly attack and destroy essential fertility hormones produced within their own bodies, effectively working to either abort existing pregnancies or prevent future pregnancies. However, Kenya's population has increased a fucking lot each and every year since 1995. In 1995, the nation had 27,426,000 people. At the last count in 2022, they had 54,003,000 people. The population has doubled since all these millions of women being sterilized began. Again, how fucking incompetent is the Illuminati, right? They suck at killing and sterilizing people. There are similar stories in other countries as well. In the fall of 1994, the Pro-Life Committee of Mexico was suspicious of the protocols for the tetanus toxoid campaign because they excluded males and children and called for multiple injections of the vaccine in only women of reproductive age. Allegedly, similar corrupted tetanus vaccines have been uncovered in the Philippines and in Nicaragua. And yet the population of all those nations just keeps increasing. So if these vaccines were not designed to sterilize people, what's the true story behind these claims? Let's start with who produced the propaganda piece movie Infertility. It was executive produced by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose children health defense activist group was behind a similar propagandist documentary, Medical Racism, in which real healthcare violations done to black people were positioned to stir up distrust of modern vaccines. And the film's creator, Andrew Wakefield, again, literally lost his medical license in the in the UK, because he was found guilty of serious professional misconduct. In his infamous and now retracted study, which falsely claimed a link between autism and the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, he unethically tested multiple children, including via invasive lumbar punctures, and failed to disclose he had been paid by a lawyer looking to sue vaccine manufacturers to do so. So it was a money grab. As with Kennedy's previous documentary, Infertility weaves together truths, falsehoods, genuine concerns, and debunked allegations into a superficially convincing product. Let's look at the evidence again. During the documentary, scientific papers flash on screen as we are told the indisputable fact that vaccine makers have created anti-fertility vaccines on behalf of the World Health Organization. It's implied these vaccinations create permanent sterility. They do not. What these papers actually reveal is that some researchers were interested in developing a vaccine that could replace other methods of birth control for between 300 and 500 days. When this vaccine was tested in early clinical trials in India in the 1980s, the women enrolled in the study had already had their tubes tied. They'd chosen to not get pregnant again. In a subsequent trial from the early 1990s, women attending a family planning clinic were enrolled. In all cases, antibody levels went up and then fell down. For this method to be effective contraception, regular booster shots will be required. These types of vaccines, by the way, are not available for use in humans. They never even left the experimental stage. Oh, and the fact-checking website Snopes, who conspiracy theorists say is run by George Soros, debunked this entire story in 2014. There were no laboratories in Kenya that could have accurately detected the presence of HCG bound to the tetanus toxoid, the hormone that supposedly is behind the sterilizations. These labs instead used pregnancy test kits, which do detect HCG. That is a tricky acronym for me to say, but which were designed to do so using urine and serum, not vaccines that contain preservatives and adjuvants. As the documentary explains, another laboratory, AgriQuest Limited, was later brought in to test more samples, but AgriQuest would go on to lose its accreditation after being audited. The film even got its diagrams wrong. In a move that seems to show the remarkable ignorance of the filmmakers behind infertility, animations meant to show antibodies attacking the pregnancy hormones use an illustration of the coronavirus instead of the antibodies. Close enough. The only dangerous thing about that fertility vaccine is that it's not entirely clear at what point the effects reverse, since different bodies process it differently. Meaning you could actually get pregnant before you want to start trying if your body processes it faster. Have these vaccines and other methods of birth control been tested on women from developing countries where they can skirt regulations in the U.S.? Probably. Big Pharma is not our friend. And it definitely isn't a friend of a less developed country, isn't the friend of less developed countries or the people in them. But is that evidence of a global conspiracy? No. Andrew Wakefield is a fucking nut job or phony or both. And his reputation, and his resurrection of these myths has had little to do with caring about the tetanus vaccine. His real target, as you can probably guess from the 2022 release date, was the COVID vaccine, which exploded the Population Control Vaccine Association. After the credits are done rolling, the documentary continues with clips featuring Dr. Byram Bridle, who claims that the spike protein used in the COVID-19 vaccines is toxic, and Dr. Michael Yeadon, who is seen just asking questions about whether or not the COVID vaccine will cause infertility. A 1 hour live Q&A following an early screening of this movie featured a who's who of the anti-vaccination movement. Dr. Christiane Northrup boldly told those present that people on airplanes get bloody noses just because they're around vaccinated people. Interesting. Not true. Also said she was currently planning a dating website apparently for the unvaccinated to, quote, save humanity. Sometimes I honestly wish I was this fucking insane because I get the appeal, right? We're all striving to find a purpose in life, meaning, right? Or we found meaning and purpose and we want to keep it going. How exciting to feel like you're actively helping God to prepare for some blockbuster battle, or that you're, out there saving the world from this evil Illuminati cabal. What a massive ego stroke that is. What an easy way to feel so incredibly important, right? You're a revolutionary. Just believe, just drink the Kool-Aid and surround yourself with others who also drink the Kool-Aid and are constantly pumping you up and reaffirming your fucking weird choices. Being part of the Save the Humanity crowd. It must feel fucking great. Must give people the same kind of endorphin rush and sense of high stakes importance that being in a cult gives a lot of people, right? Such a sense of like, I'm going against the grain and risking everything to do what's right and brave and noble. I am ridiculed because evil forces want to stop me from fighting such a righteous battle. When in fact, you're just fucking wrong. Vaccines are referred to by those talking heads as a murder weapon, a war crime, and a global genocide at that Q&A. So does the COVID vaccine cause infertility? No, it doesn't. Pregnant participants were not included in the first round of clinical trials of the COVID vaccines, and participants were asked to avoid becoming pregnant. Nonetheless, a number of people did become pregnant by accident, and accidental pregnancies occurred equally across the vaccinated and unvaccinated groups, which tells us scientifically, unemotionally, right, that the vaccines did not prevent pregnancy. 6 studies which recruited participants before they were vaccinated and asked them to record their cycles in real time found that vaccination was associated with a delay to the next period that was very small compared to a normal variation. But that's a far cry from a sterilization program. What about in men? The theory that, the COVID vaccines sterilized men became increasingly popular after rapper Nicki Minaj posted on X on September 13th, 2021, "My cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bully." Not sure what went on with Nicki's cousin's friend's nuts. Maybe he sat on them or something, but the COVID vaccine hasn't been proven to reduce male fertility either. One study encompassed 100 individuals, 50 individuals with a mean age of 34 years, who received 2 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine, and 50 individuals with a mean age of 34 as well, who received 2 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. All semen characteristics were compared pre- and post-vaccination with both types, right? All that vaccine cum thoroughly examined, sniffed, tasted, maybe just the first part, and no significant differences were noted in all semen characteristics post-Sinopharm vaccination, including volume, pH, color, odor, viscosity, concentration, liquefaction time, progressive motility, total motility concentration, total number, percent motility, tastiness, how good it feels to rub it onto your tits, how much it helps decrease face wrinkles, and morphology index. And I might have made up a few of those last categories. The results provided a very scientific way of saying that the spunk stayed the same. But fuck science. Those results probably manufactured, all lies. Such a simplistic mantra to hide behind. If the answers aren't what you want them to be, if they don't fit your narrative, just ignore them. Right? Just turn on that old fucking cognitive dissonance machine you've built up in the back of your head. Don't believe it, no matter what. Now let's pivot away from fertility. When it comes to vaccines, some are worried not about the fertility angle, but about what else the vaccines could carry, like little Illuminati microchips. In this view, the pandemic was either started by Bill Gates explicitly so that he could put tracking microchips in people, or the pandemic started naturally and Gates just took the opportunity to load everybody up with these little tiny computers. But again, why? To what end? Is he going to flip a switch and suddenly, some little tiny chip quickly slammed up your nose a couple years ago by a low-level nurse in a fucking parking lot is going to control your brain? Just, outsource it to Gates? You can be his fucking slave or something? These fuckers even know how chips work? How a chip to control one's mind is still in the stuff of sci-fi movies? This myth started after comments made by Bill Gates about a digital certificate of vaccine records, which would be used to show who'd recovered, been tested, and ultimately who received a vaccine. He made no mention of microchips. The technology he was referencing, not a microchip, more like an invisible tattoo. But regardless, the comment led to widely shared articles with headlines like, Bill Gates will use microchip implants to fight coronavirus. The article makes reference to a study founded by the Gates Foundation into a technology that could store someone's vaccine records in a special ink administered at the same time as an injection. And why exactly would that be a bad thing to do? I don't know, but conspiracists ran wild with this. In May of 2020, a Russian official said that the so-called globalists supported a covert mass chip implantation, which they may in time resort to under the pretext of a mandatory vaccination against coronavirus. A 2020 YouGov poll of 1,640 people suggests that 28% of Americans believe that Bill Gates wants to use vaccines to implant microchips in people. And many posts on social media would take up that cause. This is what Bill Gates and George Soros want to do, one May 2020 Facebook post says. Secretly stick you with a chip while testing you for the coronavirus. The Dems have a bill on the House floor ready to vote on it to require this. House Bill 6666. No bull, look it up and wake up. Hiding in plain sight. The bill has a bunch of sixes in it. Must be the evil. That number, a satanic dead giveaway.
Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. My neighbor got big testicles because we see this do it every day.
Every day. The post also shows an illustrated cross-section of a person's nasal passage and mouth while he tilts his head back. In the illustration, someone with white gloves inserts a long swab with the person's nose into the nasal passage. An arrow pointing towards the end of the swab says, implant microchip here. I'll take a chip. If I had a chip, I finally wouldn't have to worry about losing my credit cards or my driver's license, social security card, passport, insurance cards. I wouldn't have to keep track of medical records and shit that I always lose. Put it in my fucking chip. Stick it in my nose already, Bill. Throw some cool games and movies and stuff on it too. I'm ready. But if you can't forcibly inject someone with a substance that will either kill them or kill their future children, is there some other way to get a deadly chemical agent out there to reduce the population? What if you just put it in the sky? This is exactly what those who believe in chemtrails think. Right? This belief holds that long-lasting condensation trails left in the sky by high-flying aircraft are actually chemtrails consisting of chemical or biological agents sprayed for a variety of purposes. Could be anything from weather modification to psychological manipulation to, you guessed it, population control. And what is their evidence? The proponents claim that after 1995, contrails began to have a different chemical composition and lasted a lot longer in the sky, which is why they had to be full of nefarious shit, even though this is not true. There is evidence of long-lasting contrails going back to World War II era photographs, but that doesn't fit the narrative, so fuck it. Chemtrail conspiracy theories began to circulate after the U.S. Air Force published a 1996 report about weather modification. In the late 90s, the Air Force was accused of spraying the U.S. population with mysterious substances from aircraft generating unusual contrail patterns. As the chemtrail conspiracy theory spread, popularized by online forums, federal officials were flooded with angry calls and letters. In the early 2000s, the Air Force released an updated fact sheet that stated that the conspiracy theories were a hoax, fueled in part by citations to a 1996 strategy paper drafted within their Air University titled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. The paper was presented in response to a military directive to outline a future strategic weather modification system for the purpose of maintaining the U.S. military dominance in the year 2025 and identified as, quote, fictional representations of future situations and scenarios. The Air Force further clarified in 2005 that the paper does not reflect current military policy, practice, or capability, and that it is not conducting any weather modification experiments or programs and has no plans to do so in the future. But maybe it's still using it for population control, right? To be sure, the idea that the government is spraying humanity with chemicals not without, a historical basis. During the Cold War, the British government conducted more than 750 mock chemical warfare attacks on the general public, according to researchers. This subjected hundreds of thousands of people to zinc cadmium sulfide, a chemical chose due to its small size. It's similar to that of germs, and because it glows under ultraviolet light, making it easy to trace. The chemical was thought to be non-toxic at the time, but repeated exposure can be cancerous. The U.S. did the same shit in the 1950s and 60s, using the chemical as a tracer to test the dispersion of biological weapons. U.S. military has, for sure, sprayed horrible shit on its own citizens from the sky, and done a lot of other secretive horrible shit. Right? I talked a lot about it in episode 175, the declassified military documents suck. However, chemtrails specifically have never been proven to have anything in them besides water vapor, no matter how hard people have tried to prove that. In 2007, a Louisiana television station did a report on the air underneath the crosshatch of supposed chemtrails. The atmosphere was measured, apparently found to contain unsafe levels of barium at 6.8 parts per million, 3 times the nationally recommended limit. But a subsequent analysis of the footage showed that the equipment had been misused, and the reading exaggerated by a factor of 100. The true level of barium measured was both usual and safe. Even former CIA employee and whistleblower Edward Snowden, a man clearly not afraid of exposing government secrets, said he had searched through all the secret information of the U.S. government for evidence about chemtrails, and said that though he had ridiculous access to the networks of the NSA, the CIA, the military, he couldn't find anything. Nevertheless, one 2017 study, which had a nationally representative sample of 1,000 people, found that about 10% of Americans believed the conspiracy completely, while upwards of 30% of Americans at least found it somewhat true. And it may be the unclear aim of chemtrails. Are they to control the weather, for population control, that makes it such a successful conspiracy theory? As some believers told us, the power of the conspiracy is that it can be adjusted to fit any new information, since the smoking gun evidence never seems to come. Coy Cheshire, a professor at UC Berkeley studying social psychology, says. For example, even if believers are not sure that the so-called chemtrails are actually being used for population control, the narrative can easily shift to weather manipulation and climate change without requiring new information or evidence. Luckily, to help us all understand what chemtrails are for sure being used for, a very smart man named Dimitrios Alexopoulos has written the Chemtrails Detoxification Handbook. Advertised as a Secret Service detoxification method against dangerous chemtrail poisons. Protect yourself and your family from the effects of toxic sprays. Alexopoulos' biography on Amazon states, Dimitrios Alexopoulos, the Peloponnesian friend, born in Athens, Greece in 1975, is a journalist and keen researcher in the fields of conspiracy theories, specialized in nutrition and environmental poisoning issues. He's a marketing and communication graduate from the University of Athens. Well, this keen fucker lays out some historical research about where these chemtrails come from, starting in the introduction to his book. During the Cold War period, Soviet Union and the U.S. gave their true effort to develop and apply some of the most unbelievable non-nuclear weapons. The target at that time was clear. The enemy, no matter what, should at any time be eliminated. The variety of these weapons was vast, stretching from sophisticated lasers and LSD tests to strange occult manipulation techniques, telepathy and mind control. The amount of the knowledge that both world powers gained by that race was by no means small. Then the Berlin Wall fell, and the enemy were not so clear. The battle for world domination has just started, but this time the enemy is you, the simple citizen of your state who still hope for a better future. So who are these people? The usual suspects. NWO employees, tri-laterals, Bilderbergers, banksters, etc. They decided that overpopulation is strangling the globe and absorbs Earth's resources so rapidly that in a few years long, there wouldn't be a sustainable planet left. What a joke. What hypocrisy. So we are overcrowded, and these folks decided criminally to reduce our number. But as many of you know, to kill an animal is better first to give him disruptions, so it could easily and without reaction to stand and die. Okay? They came up with a plan. First make them like zombies through mercury poisonous vaccines and chem foods. Then proceed to infect air and delete them quietly. Wonder how neurodiseases, cancer, and breathing deficiencies spread so fast in our times? How the morning awakening seems so hard? Notice headaches, dizziness, and sense of lost mind all day long? While the plan is known, the method is over our heads, several days per month. Chemtrail's the name. Yep, strange civilian military aircrafts spread around our necks, deadly minerals like aluminum and barium, easily absorbed but extremely harsh to expel from our bodies. Harsh, yes, but not impossible. There are always ways to take them out from our system. This book shows how. He's a fucking great writer. He doesn't even need an editor, you know? He just wings it. Makes me nervous that I'm about to be deleted by a sophisticated leaser. Next time my morning awakening is so hard, I'm going to think about my Peloponnesian friend's advice. He returns to the subject of aluminum and barium later on, saying that they're so toxic, quote, because our system fails to recognize them as potential enemies and thus to extract them. But luckily, he writes, there are herbs and everyday cooking supplies that can do the job with no side effects. There are bath and water usage that can do the same. There are natural stone magnets that eliminate the false messaged reaction between the body cells and the toxic minerals that eventually turn into cancer. 100%. Are you worried about cancer? Well, fucking slap some magnets on your skin, you dipshit. Eliminate your false message reactions. Shut the fuck up. Take an Epsom salt bath. Eat some oregano. A little apple cider vinegar. Rub it on your, back. Put some celery juice on your balls. You dummy. Next, for some reason, he starts talking about his credentials. Journalist and keen researcher with contacts here and there, they're angry with the feeling that I'm a potential murderer victim by my own government and dark agencies like a small toy to play with. Few years ago, I was covering the issue of the poisoned Ukrainian president, Viktor Yushchenko, with the really mess up face. If you can only see and hear from his staff and ordinary citizens how vibrant and smiling gentle was that man before being target from few global scams. But he was tough and lucky. The poison did enter his system, but fortunately with not irreversible damage. The way he writes in English makes him sound like Chikatilo. What is big deal? You fix chemtrail poison with magnets, you wrestle down devil poison, fight off leasers with celery juice, and make soft shamcock hard again. It's no problem. Viktor Yushchenko was actually poisoned in 2004. During the Ukrainian presidential election, British toxicologists found that he had been poisoned with dioxin, finding the levels in his blood, to be 6,000 times above normal levels. Many have linked Yushchenko's poisoning to a dinner with a group of senior Ukrainian officials that took place on September 5th, 2004. Yushchenko himself implicated David Zavanya, godfather of one of his own children, of involvement in his dioxin poisoning, not chemtrails. But let's continue with our Peloponnesian friend's really, really good book. After quoting a bunch of other random shit, he concludes, so basically, chemtrails are a biological poisonous weapon system designed to progressively undermine human nervous and immune systems in order for the global elite controllers to transform us into zombie-style slaves. Zombie-style slaves? Does the Illuminati even need us to be zombie-style slaves anymore with all the advancements being made with robots? I mean, have you seen the new all-electric Atlas bipedal humanoid robot developed by Boston Dynamics or Tesla's Optimus robot? Seems like just those two companies are on the verge of eliminating the Illuminati's need for human slaves. Robots can do their bidding, right? More efficient, less likely to rebel. They can just keep a small number of us in, cages so they can fuck us or harvest our adrenochrome, whatever, sacrifices to Satan. And then they can, probably use the robots to actually, make sure we keep breeding and, capture one of us who get escape or some shit. Back to Demetrios, how do we save ourselves from chemtrail poison? For starters, make sure you're eating plenty of milk thistle. That's right, milk thistle. Don't fucking skimp on the this, you dork. He says it's the only herb that actually helps the organ to rebirth. That's his quote. It's only herb that actually helps organ to rebirth. Moreover, several scientific researches come to the conclusion that helps other organs too, like the heart, lungs, and kidneys. All the basics. Its active ingredient, silymarin, he says, stabilizes cell membranes, thus preventing toxic chemicals from entering the cell. And how should you ingest all this milk thistle? Well, he writes, first of all, in our case, although there are many reliable milk thistle products, we refer primarily to the use of Silibus marinarum cooking oil, not essential oil, for the first 2 to 6 months, depending on the gravity of poisoning, derived by the frequency of the sprays, followed by some weekly artichoke meals for the rest of the schedule. Yeah, just fucking, just eat a lot of milk thistle. If you don't have a side of milk thistle and artichoke on your plate, I don't know how you're fucking still alive. He also points to nutrients found in red wine and black tea, some antioxidants, and it's true that these antioxidants scavenge particles in the body, known as free radicals, which damage cell membranes, tamper with DNA, and even cause cell death. Fruits and vegetables are the primary dietary sources of these antioxidants, particularly citrus fruits, apples, onions, parsley, sage, tea, and red wine. Olive oil, grapes, dark cherries, and dark berries, such as blueberries, blackberries, also are very, very beneficial. And milk thistle is actually really good for you. I'm actually going to start taking it to help lower my liver fat, but this stuff is not some sort of miracle cure against this supposed Illuminati chemtrail poison. Demetrios also recommends drinking water. He says you should drink 2 to 3 liters a day of water during chemtrail periods. You should also use water that's become purified by leaving it in clear bottles in direct sunlight for 2 to 3 hours, because the sunlight destroys chemicals like fluoride. It doesn't. Studies have shown that UF light, can UF light exposure. Oh my gosh, or UV light exposure can kill bacteria and other microorganisms, but it cannot remove minerals like fluoride. He writes, you can also simply have a very hot bath, which you have to get into all the way up to your neck, deep baptism, and stay for at least 50 minutes. You will then see the toxins getting out. But again, I must stress that they must be very hot. Get in that fucking hot-ass bath. You gotta burn yourself. You watch your skin flake off, which is the chemtrail. And then eat a lot of milk. Sit in your fucking hot bath up to your neck and have somebody feed you milk thistle, artichokes, and sunlight-treated water. Oh, fuck yeah, you're gonna be so healthy. He also waxes poetic about the benefits of celery. Writing, simply add it to your salad. Also calls lemon, this is one of my favorites, he calls lemon the cancer destroyer. But if you eat it with salt, it will give you leukemia, which is interesting. Lemon alone, fucking destroys cancer. Pour a little salt on it, now you have leukemia. I have a lot of questions. What if you don't put salt on the lemon, but you eat salted popcorn 50 minutes after drinking lemon juice? Will that give you cancer? What if you have lemon-flavored salty popcorn and you give yourself cancer, but then you drink unsalted lemon juice 15 minutes later? Will that cure the cancer you've just given yourself? Now on to Demetrios Alexopoulos' last, probably most important chemtrail protection section, when he talks about stones and magnets. I gotta hope Lindsay never listens to this section. We have enough rocks in our house already. So here's what he says here. Tourmaline gemstone is a semi-precious mineral stone, well known for its incredible ability to aid in the detoxification process of the human body. It is one of only a handful of minerals that have the ability to emit negative ions and far infrared rays. The tourmaline gemstone has the uncanny ability to become its own source of electric charge, as it is both pyroelectric as well as piezoelectric. When the gem is put under greater amounts of pressure, or when it is drastically heated or cooled, it creates an electrical charge capable of emitting infrared waves and negative ions. Far infrared rays and negative ions gently heal, soothe, stimulate, and detox the physical body, as well as the mind. Far infrared rays are invisible waves of energy that have the ability to penetrate all layers of the human physical body, delving into the innermost regions of the tissues, muscles, and bone. This gem has been reported to actually have the power to boost sexual energy in men, as it increases the blood flow and circulation in the body. The gemstone is also reported as helping to ease emotions, increasing vitality and vigor in both men and women. No chemical or no chemtrail poisoning and a harder dick. Oh, okay. Yeah, sign me up. All you have to do is buy a peanut-sized or larger piece of the stone, wash it, let it drain out in the sunlight, which recharges, of course, And then you only need to recharge it every 6 months, which is fucking amazing. Just a little bit of sunlight. A little bit of sunlight every 6 months, and it's fully charged. That's it. Now you're safe from chemtrails. Last thing on Dimitrios Alexopoulos, he has multiple author pages on Amazon. Every time he writes a new book, he gives himself a brand new author page, which is unusual. My favorite other book of his, Questions and Answers, Personal Development Guide. And what's that book about? Well, it's everything you need to know about success and about happiness, and 78 questions and exercises just for you, arranged from A to Z. The Q&A personal daily guide for a better life. Literally everything you need to know about success in one book. Incredible. I'm probably going to quit podcasting soon and start a new career as our Peloponnesian friend's literary agent. Lastly, let's look quickly at population control through food and water and that unholy 3-letter acronym, GMO. There are 4 main types of popular GMO conspiracy theories. 1, GMOs are biological weapons, meaning genetically modified technology transfers bacterial and viral genes into animal and plant cells, with the resultant GMOs sold to other countries to harm their citizens. 2 has GMOs as a state control tool, which holds that GMOs are a tool of Western developed countries, especially the United States, to control developing nations and the world's food supply. These theorists believe that developing countries are increasingly reliant on genetically modified technology and crops developed by developed Western countries. Thus, their food strategy and security are tightly controlled by developed countries. The third kind of conspiracy theory falls into the realm of business tactics, which maintains that GMOs are employed by giant international agrochemical corporations such as Monsanto to sell more pesticides or herbicides. Conspiracists suggest that GMOs use more insecticides, thus giant international agrochemical corporations can make more money from selling pesticides or herbicides by promoting the cultivation of genetically modified crops. And finally, the craziest, genocide conspiracy theories, which believe that GMO technology is a bioweapon used by white people to wipe out people of color. This theory was popularized after an outbreak of the Zika virus, which was suspected of being produced and spread by genetically modified mosquitoes. This is where we really get into the population control element. According to Natural News, the website of self-described health ranger Mike Adams, GMOs are already being used for population control as part of a concerted, organized, and long-standing effort to eliminate African Americans from the gene pool and Africans in general. Adams is at the crazy end of the increasingly wacky anti-GMO scene. His obsessions vary from the fluoridation of water to the supposedly harmful effects of childhood vaccines to the promotion of raw, unpasteurized milk. Adams is also an HIV AIDS denialist, interesting, and has claimed an Ebola outbreak in West Africa was not an accident. And he sells his own brand of organic prepper food, the so-called Ranger Bucket Organic Emergency Storable Food Supply, which can be yours for a mere $349 a piece. Hey, it's Mike Adams here, and it's the end of the world as you know it. But fear not. You can survive Illuminati destruction by purchasing my Ranger Bucket Organic Emergency Storable Food Supply. 526 survival servings in every pair of 2 fucking buckets. In these buckets, you will get 5 pounds of organic aluminum foil and a set of instructions on how to make Bill Gates mind control prevention helmets. 25 pounds of organic chemtrail damage repairing milk thistle. 2 pounds of organic lemons to cure cancer. 1 pound of salt to add to previously mentioned lemons to give cancer to New World Order enemies. 2 organic throwing axes, 1 for Bill Gates, 1 for George Soros. And also, 6 pounds of organic popcorn because it's tasty. 3 pounds of organic chocolate because it's also tasty. And 27 pounds of organic peanut butter because we bought way too much peanut butter, greatly overestimating its popularity. Sound like a great deal? But wait, there's more. You will also receive organic black beans, organic cashews, organic ramen noodles, organic taco shells, grass-fed beef, grass-fed chicken, grass-fed salmon, grass-fed turkey, grass-fed corn, grass-fed wheatgrass, grass-fed lemongrass, grass-fed organic batteries to power a grass-fed organic transistor radio to send grass-fed organic communications to a grass-fed organic allies in the fight against the heavily processed, not grass-fed, not organic Illuminati that want to sterilize, fake vaccinate, and enslave you. So grab 2 buckets of fucking today. Get some Ranger Bucket Organic Emergency Storable Food Supply while supplies last and survive Bill and George's non-organic, not grass-fed, heavily vaccinated Plandemic attempt to depopulate your planet. I think it goes without saying that what I listed is not what comes in those Ranger Buckets, but they do contain 2 pounds of organic popcorn, though. Not sure if it's grass-fed popcorn or not. I love saying fucking shit that, like, corn is grass-fed. or whatever. Even though Adams clearly has a financial motive, his theories have caught on. And although natural news generates most of its traffic from the U.S., the global nature of the web allows its conspiracy theories to circulate and cause serious damage elsewhere. In African countries in particular, anti-GMO myths have been adopted by nationalists and homegrown anti-science campaigners who recycle memes picked up from the internet for a domestic audience. In Nigeria, for instance, anti-GMO campaigners have assiduously promoted myths that genetically improved seeds are intended to sterilize Africans. In a recent interview with the news agency of Nigeria, one scientist leveled the wildly false claim that GMOs can cause autism and cancer. And he talked about the possibility of a gene capable of causing mass sterilization of people via consumption of foods without the consumers finding out. Sadly, the failure to adopt GMO crops has had a slow and degenerative effect on Africa, where farmers have not experienced the economic boons enjoyed by their counterparts in other parts of the developing world. And that's the problem with so many conspiracies. Illogical fear keeps, people from doing shit that would actually really help them. Now, let's recap. So what do you think? Are elites, especially organic grass-fed Bill Gates, out to decrease the world's population through any means necessary, from chemtrails to GMOs to making people infertile? Or is that a bunch of pseudoscience and outright nonsense advocated by people who don't truly understand population dynamics, are not social scientists, aren't often any kind of scientists, and are people who simply want to believe, for a variety of reasons, that some big, bad, evil entity is out to get them? By all accounts, people like billionaires George Soros and Bill Gates, along with the UN, are not trying to decrease the world's population. What they are trying to do is make sure people live longer, have better lives, more access to medical care, access to education and opportunities that can improve their standing in the world. And as people's quality of life increases, the number of children they have generally decreases. Lowering the fertility rate is a side effect, not a goal of these programs. They want women to be able to do something that's not just birthing baby after baby after baby if that's not what they want to do. They want people to, not feel like they have to have multiple children to increase the chances of one or more of them surviving to adulthood. But of course, that's not a fun or interesting narrative. It's not sexy. It's not full of drama. So much more exciting to believe in one of the depopulation set of conspiracy theories. These theories come in a number of flavors, right? The general theme running through them is that there's some sort of hidden in plain sight method that elites are pushing to either reduce living people or to decrease fertility. This sort of spins off into many different flavors, including theories about genocide or targeting specific races or demographics, often with the help of chemical giants like Monsanto or the United Nations. Obviously United Nations is not a chemical giant. Just about everything or anything that can be said to involve chemicals can be implicated in this nefarious scheme. Vaccines, genetically modified food, etc. Other variations of the theories have an anti-abortion tinge, including conspiracy theories about Planned Parenthood and founder Margaret Sanger. And what do all these theories have in common? For one thing, they're very anti-wealth / anti-billionaire. They're highly mistrustful of elites, governing bodies, and modern medicine. Additionally, they're also highly, anti-environmental and anti-environmentalist, as environmentalists are some of the first people who started seriously warning about overpopulation in the modern era. They tend to be strongly pro-life and connect some of these doomsday scenarios to things written in the Book of Revelations, and they seem to be mad at some humans for supposedly playing God. But don't we sort of have to play God if you want to increase the quality of life for the average meat sack here? We have limited resources on this planet. That's a fact. Some are renewable, some renew faster than others, but we can't just consume infinitely while also growing the overall population endlessly. So we do have to play God, in the sense that we have to structure society so that the biggest amount of people can have the best quality of life possible. And that may mean at some point fewer people. But also, the world's population is currently on a trajectory to level off and perhaps drop in about 100 years, according to most recent estimates. So why don't these billionaires just wait? Why don't they just let nature take its course? Are they just addicted to bloodlust and secret schemes? Or is that just a fun story? An exciting Matrix-like movie you can choose to be one of the stars of, at least in your mind. Time for today's takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, when it comes to the population, the world is currently full of about 8.1 billion people, a number projected to increase to around 10 billion people by the century's end, before naturally leveling off as more and more people have fewer children. Though that sounds like a lot of people, and it is, it does not mean that the world is actually overcrowded. Innovations in agriculture and continued development of new technology, like those hated GMOs, have helped feed more and more people than ancient alarmists like Thomas Malthus were able to foresee. Number 2, but at the same time, we don't want infinite growth, which is why it's a good thing that the world's population will level off in the future. Population, how to have a big enough of one when one is too big, has been something that human beings have thought about for centuries and will continue to think about. We'll have to, As populations change, as groups of people get older in places where babies aren't being born as much, new services will be needed to accommodate them. New work arrangements may be needed to support the economy, etc. Just a couple examples of why understanding how to manage a population is so very important. Number 3, there have been actual attempts at population control in the history of humanity, most notably China's one-child policy in the middle of the 20th century and later in the 20th century. Can you fucking imagine throwing your daughter down a well to make room for the possibility of a son? Lu Chun-san does not have to imagine that. He did that. Number 4, though such a program has never existed in the U.S. or much of anywhere in the modern world, people continue to think that billionaires are trying to depopulate as many people as they can via nefarious means like pandemics, vaccines for those pandemics, reducing the fertility rate, chemtrails, GMOs, and probably more. There are a lot of flavors of conspiracy within the depopulation umbrella. But the biggest question these conspiracy theorists can answer is also the simplest. Why? The world's population will level off. All we as a species have to do is wait and continue improving people's quality of life. But that's not a good story. Evil billionaires assisted by the corrupt UN? Way more exciting. Number 5, new info. There is actually a connection between Monsanto and infertility. Dun, dun, dun! Bear Evil Incorporated. In 2001, a small biotech company called Epicite that was is supposedly owned or was owned by Monsanto created a gene that makes sperm sterile. And I guess this is actually true. Researchers at Epicite discovered a rare class of human antibodies that attack sperm. By isolating the genes that regulate the manufacture of these antibodies and by putting them in corn plants, the company created tiny horticultural factories that could make contraceptives. They could make corn that could kill your sperm count. Also created corn plants that make antibodies against the herpes virus, hoping to be able to make a plant-based jelly that not only prevents pregnancy, but also blocks the spread of sexual disease. I couldn't find this on a lot of articles, but I found a few. So I'm 90% sure this is true. And it sounds fucking amazing. No herpes, no babies with no condoms. Lucifina is pleased. Their goal was to develop healthy and effective methods of birth control and sexually transmitted disease prevention, but this intention got warped by the conspiracy hive mind. Doesn't seem like Epicite has done much since this breakthrough, which is a bummer. If they can develop some kind of corn that will prevent pregnancy and all STDs, let me know. I want to invest everything I have in that sweet-ass magic corn. It'll be the greatest corn-related invention since someone figured out how to fucking popcorn. Hail sex corn.
Timesuck. Top 5 takeaways.
Population control conspiracies are wealthy elites trying to kill you has been sucked. Thank you to the Bad Magic Productions team for all the help in making Timesuck, such as Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins, running operations around here. Logan Keith recording this episode and designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. And thanks to Sophie Evans once again doing a fantastic job with providing the initial research this week. Also, thanks to the All-Seeing Eyes moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everyone over on the Timesuck subreddit and the Bad Magic subreddit. And now for today's updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
Our first update is doozy. Fortunate Sack, Tyler Butcher, has some pretty exciting Pat Sajak information for us. He writes, Dear Master of all things suck, greetings and salutations, oh Captain Mushmouth. Oh man, I Mushmouth out of control today. I am sending you this email because I've actually met Pat Sajak in person and lived to tell the tale. Here goes, also preemptive, not sorry for the length. Back in late 2022, I submitted an application to be on Wheel of Fortune. Nothing crazy, just a few questions. Why do you want to be on Wheel of Fortune? Kind of prompts. I enter it and wait. About 6 weeks later, I get a reply from Sony for a virtual interview. Apparently, since the pandemic, they moved all the interviews online and do it via Zoom. I'm on there with 8 other people, 2 producers of the show, and 5 other hopeful contestants. If you're not familiar with the show, they do toss-up puzzles every couple of rounds on the broadcast. That's essentially what this interview was. I got one and then, just like the show, had to give a little backstory on myself. I almost got a couple more, but wasn't quick on the draw. After that, they break off into little teams to have you do more toss-up puzzles under a 90-second time limit. You have 16 to figure out, and I got 14. Apparently, they don't want buffoons like Dick Turd on the show. They want people who can actually guess some puzzles. Finally, after the little pop quiz, the producers said they will take the names of whoever they select and put it in a contestant pool to draw at random for an invite to come to a taping. They warned if selected, we may not hear back for 12 to 18 months. Fast forward to this past February. I got the call. I was selected for a taping. They would cover the flight, but I had to pay for a hotel. I'm going to Hollywood, baby. Okay, Culver City, but still. I get to the Sony studio on a Monday for the start of the taping. Before my first taping, they had the contestants in their version of a green room, snacks, drinks, that sort of thing. One of the producers comes in and says in about 5 minutes, Pat and Vanna are going to come in and introduce themselves. They told us we could ask one question if we wanted. I immediately thought of you and the podcast and figured, what the fuck? I'll never get this opportunity, an opportunity like this again. I was going to ask if he knew about Timesuck. This was my moment. Carpe fucking diem. A few minutes later, Pat and Vanna walk in with the clothes they were going to wear on the show. Pat was a little shorter than I thought he would be in real life. Vanna, hail Lucifina. She is still just as gorgeous as she's been for 40 years. I'd like to solve her puzzle. They introduced themselves and asked if we had any questions for them before the taping. One of the other contestants asked him about hobbies outside of work, and Pat said he liked to play Wheel of Fortune online in his usual dry humor way. When it got to me, my hands got a little sweaty. This was it. Now or never. I asked Pat, are you familiar with the podcast Timesuck? In the back of my head, I'm thinking, that's all your hobbies, Pat? Wheel of Fortune online? Come on. Pat looked a little confused for a second, and then it dawned on him. He said, that's the historical crime podcast where the host, who is it, Dan Cummings, says I'm a serial killer? My face went white and I started laughing. I agreed. He chuckled and said, it's a good thing all I do is play Wheel of Fortune online in my spare time. He winked at me, shook my hand, then they gave their goodbyes and left the room, mind fucking blown. He's on to you, Dan. He knows. Finally, the show taped. I came in second with $12,750 and a trip to the Bahamas, so no bonus round for me. After the show, I had to sign a bunch of tax papers and an NDA because my show wouldn't premiere for several more weeks after that. My show came out April 16th. All in all, it was an awesome experience, made even more awesome that Pat knew about you and Timesuck, albeit completely butchering your last name. Still not sorry about the length of the email. 3 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't change a thing. Your loyal space is Tyler B. But then Tyler wrote something Lindsay did not notice when she initially read me this email, Tyler. It was spaced way down to the bottom of the page. And then Tyler wrote, P.S. This entire email was bullshit. Revenge for the Dick Turd episode, motherfuckers. There was no Wheel of Fortune taping, no flight to California, and if I really met Pat Sajak, I wouldn't be here typing you this email. Hope you got a chuckle out of it because I had to do my research and look up how the casting process went. Hope this is used on the show, and if it is, can you give a special shout out to my wife, Joni? She's my rock in life and listens to you in the car with me. She still hasn't submitted, though. PPS, I think you should rename the top 5 takeaways. Dead takeaways. Dead takeaways. It's a good idea. Well, Tyler, you fucking got both Lindsay and I. You got Lindsay so hard. And then she got really excited. Then she shared it with me. And then I got really excited. And then she forwarded me the email for this little like special email column or inbox I have to select updates from. And then when I looked at it there, I saw a bunch of space on the bottom. I think I just accidentally scrolled. And I was like, wait a minute. Kept scrolling, saw your PS and PPS, and we both laughed a ton. Joni, careful with this guy. He is very good at selling some convincing bullshit. I deserve that, Tyler. Well played. Well played. I was so fucking excited for a second. I was like, Pat Sajak knows, yes! And then, next up, a bit more Dick Bird silliness from Smart Sack Lou Stubbs, who writes, Dear Suckmaster, just dropping a short line to congratulate you on the achievement of fooling Meta's AI and being referenced as an undeniable source. In fucking with Meta's AI, this is true, by the way, I decided to see what it could tell me of criminals accused criminals. After a brief chat regarding O.J. Simpson, I decided to ask about this sick spank-happy fuck named Dick Bird. And Meta AI did not disappoint. Thanks again for the laugh. Screenshots are attached. Yes, and in this screenshot, said, oh my God, trying to make this bigger here. Richard Bird, also known as the Las Vegas Strip Strangler, is the serial killer who committed the rape and murder of 8 women in Las Vegas between 1991 and 2001. He was arrested the day after 9/11, took a plea bargain, never went to trial, and it just goes on and on. Like it's a real thing. Oh my God, Lou, this is so hilarious. Dick Bird lives on the internet. AI does not know he's a joke. After getting your email, I Googled, who is the Las Vegas Strangler? And this is what came back just via Google's AI. Richard Bird, also known as the Las Vegas Strip Strangler, is a serial killer who raped and strangled 8 young women in Las Vegas. This joke is going to be fucking with people for years. Thank you, Lou. Made me so happy. And now this next update comes in from someone who does not like this show at all. Really hated the Dick Bird episode. Not joking. Lindsay saw this screenshot of a recent Apple review of Timesuck getting passed around in the Coldly Curious 3 out of 5 stars Facebook group. And I have to share this. We both laughed so fucking hard last night about this. Just a random person left a 1-star review. Horrible unless you like to be irritated. And they said, I tried this podcast tonight and picked an episode based on interest, live in an area, hadn't heard of the case, listened to over 2 hours of of a speculative and annoying host describe the quote facts in this very strange case, only to be told at the end that it wasn't true. It was an April Fool's Day joke. What a waste of time. If the if the host was funny or even slightly amusing, or had I been in the mood for funny, I might be okay with it, but they weren't. I was resolved to unsubscribe and move on till we got to the promised payoff. But after being told I wasted my valuable time with something so stupid, I had to spend the next 30 minutes finding the Apple app, then this stupid podcast, and then figuring out how to leave a review. It was so bad. Drivel. I love that they were so mad that they wasted 2 hours of their life and then wasted another half an hour of their life just to leave this review that will fucking deter no one from this show.
I love that someone who has a very valuable time doesn't know how to find that podcast app.
Right. They're very valuable time. Oh my God, that fucking killed me. That made me laugh so hard. And I'm sure that won't be the last one. But I do honestly kind of feel bad for them that they were like, I just want to find something new. And they're just like, this is not the show for them. But they're like, well, I haven't heard of this. And they're like, oh, God, this is weird. God, I don't like this guy, but I'm gonna keep listening because I want to get familiar with this case. And then just at the end, he'd be like, ha ha, that was all bullshit. Oh, and that's it for this week's Timesucker updates.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Scared to Death and Timesuck each week. Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel on the Timesuck and Scared to Death podcast feeds some weeks. Please don't make any important life decisions based on believing wealthy elites and or the UN are trying to kill or sterilize you this week or keep you from having kids, because they're not. You're not that important. They don't give a shit about you. But I do. So just forget about all that. Stick with me and keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
I keep thinking about that birth control herpes corn. I wonder if that is real. I mean, I think it's real, but there wasn't a lot of articles about it. God, when I was in college or when I was between like getting divorced and getting remarried to Lindsay, if I would have had some fuck all you want, consequence-free herpes birth control corn, I would have lived mostly on that corn. And I would have burned off all those corn-fed calories just with constant fucking. What a world. What a life. Why isn't some form of that shit on the market? Bring on the sex corn. Come on, Lucifina.